Hi, I'm Sweetie Aboshi, and this is the AM News. To begin with, Lands and Natural Resources Minister-designate Emmanuel Akufo-Addo has assured there will be no new mining activities in forest reserves if his appointment is approved. He made this strong commitment during his vetting before the Appointment Committee of Parliament. According to him, one of his first priorities in office will be to work towards the repeal of LI 2462, which allows mining in the forest reserves.
Mr. Chairman, it is correct. We have said that there will be no new mining activities in forest reserve, and the intention is to make sure that LI 2462 is will be amended to make sure that this provision that allows mining in forest reserve is not in place. We will make sure that happens. If you give me the chance as the minister, that will be the first order of business, to make sure that there will be no new mining activities in forest reserve. Chairman, I was very excited about new initiatives that will help us to heal the wounds of our country. Our country is bleeding. Our forest, that is really at the heart and soul of our survivor, has been completely devastated, damaged. And don't take my words for it. This is what the NDC intends to do. We are bringing 3 great initiatives: the Blue Water Initiative, which seeks to heal and harness the environment by turning areas degraded by illegal mining into hubs of economic and ecological recovery. That's what we are going to do.
He also vowed to take decisive action against anyone who flouts the law by engaging in illegal mining.
We are going to stand together with the people of Ghana to fight illegal mining. It doesn't matter your status, it doesn't matter your political correlation. If you want to do mining, we have legal processes for getting licenses and doing mining. And this is the good news, Chairman. We have seen why we are where we are. We are where we are because, in my view, a lot of the attempts at addressing some of the issues failed because of some of the points I'm bringing. I come from a mining district. And so I can tell you that number one of the interventions we are going to do is to change the approach. One will be community engagement in a different way. We are going to start a very genuine and transparent approach by first making sure that the people in the areas where mining occurs understand that the destiny of their area is in their hands. The river bodies, the forests, they are the leaders of these areas, and we are going to give them that respect and empower them, working with them to give them the support. If we are going to sell community mining, we are going to put it together in cooperatives and make sure we create enclaves, proper enclaves. And this is one of the problems, Mr. Chairman, and I think the former minister knows. Why is it that everybody is going crazy, digging everywhere? Because they are all looking for where the gold is. We are going to work with the Mineral Commission to make sure, working with the Geological Survey, to have geological investigation to identify mineralized areas where we can now focus attention in groups. When we talked about licensing and decentralizing, that's my second point, decentralizing the licensing regime, because we want the communities to be empowered. Nobody is going to wait for 4 years to get a mining license. They will do illegal mining. But guess what? We are going to make the process such a way that it is easy for them to go through the process. Because ultimately, our focus is to make sure that we deal with people who are engaged in illegal mining ruthlessly, because we've created a pathway, we've empowered the community to do the right thing.
On a related matter, former President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo's government issuing 102 mining licenses in its last week, which included 21 small-scale mining licenses, prospecting licenses, mining licenses, as well as licenses for mining support services. The Minister for Lands and Natural Resources designate, Emmanuel Amakofi-Boa, says he will review these licenses.
When I get the opportunity to be approved as the minister, my intention is to undertake a holistic review of the licensing regime. I've already talked about how there's so much duplication in the issue of licenses. I've talked about one individual who will be holding almost 50 licenses because he has not been classified as a light scale and he wants to continue to do mining. So he's doing mining in contiguous area. And if you put it all together, he's probably close to large-scale mining. We need to look at this recategorization. We need to do a holistic review of this licensing regime to address the issue you've brought about. I think that part of the problems we've had, as you have described, in terms of what we see in the pollution of our water bodies and destruction of our environment, has to do with some of the illegalities, not only perpetrated by the illegal miners, but even people with small-scale mining licenses. That is where we must focus on, and to make sure we organize them well, to make sure we can have supervision and monitoring, to make sure we can use modern technology to focus this industry so that we will not have the challenges we've had.
Mr. Nominee, will you consider revoking licenses that were acquired without the process or procedure?
Thank you, Chairman.
Please.
I've said that there will be a holistic review of all of these processes. Chairman, we are guided by the law. And what I would do as minister is to make sure that the right things were done according to the law. And so we will make sure that that is done.
Thank you very much.
Now, the Minister for Food and Agriculture, Eric Opoku, has warned his staff against any attempts to sabotage his work. The minister gave this warning during an interaction with staff as part of a 3-day tour of departments and agencies under the ministry. James Aveji was on the tour with the minister and filed this report.
The Minister for Food and Agriculture, Eric Opoku, 4 days into his term in office, has begun a tour of the various directorates under his ministry.
I came here principally to introduce myself to you as part of the team and to also listen to you, appreciate some of the challenges you are facing here, and then put our shoulders to the wheel to ensure that we address some of these challenges and then take off immediately.
As part of the interactions with the minister, the staff used the opportunity to outline a number of challenges confronting them in their line of duty.
We used to have a very large tract of land. Unfortunately, as at the end of last year, all this land have been taken over from us. We are currently restricted to this portion that we have our buildings and things all.
Unfortunately, for so many years, we've been having challenges with budgetary allocations as far as SRID is concerned. And we have not been working as we should.
This is how the minister intends to resolve all of these challenges, especially the issue of land grabbing.
In fact, with respect to the land encroachment, I want the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources to be approved and sworn in. I will engage him because you know that power to protect the land is vested in the Ministry of Lands. And so when I engage the minister, we'll look at how we can put an end to this. First, if those developers do not have title to the lands on which they are developing, then we have to apply the law.
One key issue that's run through the conversation on the day has been the warning against any staff who would want to sabotage his work as a minister.
The politics is over. You may belong to a Chichidie party or Kotre party. At the end of the day, we are talking about Ghana and how to govern our country. So let's all hang our political jackets, mobilize all that we have, and then ensure that we succeed, because this is the only country we have. If you are still in the political mood and you think that everything is politics, then you are an obstacle. An obstacle must be cleared to allow free flow of development.
He is also promising to work hard to cut down on importation of agri-produce, especially onion and tomatoes from our neighboring countries.
It is unfortunate and unacceptable that a country like Ghana, with all the agricultural endowments that we have, we are still importing onion. We are importing pepper. We are importing tomato from Burkina Faso. Every peso that is expended on the importation of these items create jobs in those countries. And so if you want jobs for our children, if you want jobs for our grandchildren, for our siblings, our neighbors, our relatives, what we must do is to produce more here so that that money will stay here and create the jobs for our people.
The 3-day working tour, which is expected to come to an end on Wednesday, would inform the minister on what more decisions to take in order to reform the agri sector as promised by the NDC government. From the ministry here in Accra, I'm James Savage reporting for Joy News.
Moving on, President John Dramani Mahama has warned that the African Union's over-reliance on foreign partners compromises its independence and its ability to set its own agenda. He is calling on the African Union to expedite efforts towards achieving financial independence. Speaking at a high-level retreat on African Union institutional reforms held at Kenya's State House in Nairobi, President Mahama stressed the need for the AU to, among others, also focus on conflict resolution and counter-terrorism. He noted that peace is essential for development and urged the Union to intensify mediation efforts across the continent.
Efficiency must be the guiding principle in how we conduct our affairs, ensuring that our policies and programs translate into real change for our people. We must adopt mechanisms that prioritize accountability, transparency, and value for money, ensuring that every resource is maximized for the benefit of the African people. Your Excellencies, one of the fundamental pillars of reform is AU's financial autonomy. The over-reliance on external partners for funding compromises the organization's independence and ability to set its own agenda. The implementation of the Kigali decision on financing the Union must be expedited. A self-reliant African Union is not just a vision we have, it is an imperative to achieve.
In other stories, former Vice President Dr. Mamudu Bawumia has underscored the power of the people as an important pillar of democracy, which must be respected for democracy to thrive. Speaking as a keynote speaker at Nigeria's National Conference on Strengthening Democracy, Dr. Bawumia lamented what he referred to as the increasing fragility of democracy in some parts of Africa and said for democracy to thrive, political leaders ought to trust the political system and accept the will of the people. While calling for the strengthening of the rights of citizens to vote, as well as their will respected by political leaders, Dr. Bawumia added that democratic institutions also ought to be strengthened for stronger and more prosperous democracy.
Between 2020 and 2023, there have been about 8 coup d'etats in Africa. A few leaders have also changed or are changing their constitutions to allow them to stay in power beyond their constitutionally mandated terms. The increasing fragility of democracy in Africa and across the world is cause for concern. In democratic countries, the will of the people is expressed through elections, and leaders, especially incumbents, must trust the electoral process and accept the will of the people for the survival of democracy.
Dr. Mamudu Bawumia explained that his early concession in the 2024 presidential election was made in the supreme interest of Ghana's democracy and peace. In his address, Dr. Mamudu Bawumia revealed that he had anticipated the electoral results would take between 48 to 72 hours to be officially declared by the Electoral Commission. And aware of the rising tension and the potential for violence if the announcement was prolonged, he decided to act swiftly.
By 3 a.m. on Sunday, because the election was on Saturday, it was obvious from the data that we had received from our collation centers that my opponent, the former president and now president, John Dramani Mahama, had decisively won the election. I knew, so by 3 a.m., I had come to this conclusion that we had lost the election. I knew it would take between 48 to 72 hours for the Electoral Commission to collate and announce the official results. I was very cognizant of the tension and the potential violence that could result if there was a long, drawn-out process of announcing the results. Indeed, the tension had begun to mount. I therefore took the decision to hold a press conference
In other stories, at least 20 children living with cerebral palsy in the Ashanti region, together with their families, are anxious for respite after being evacuated from a facility they've always known to be home. With no appropriate establishment built by the government, a non-governmental organization secured a safe facility from a private property owner and turned it into the only foster care home in the region for the children with special needs. But after 4 years of renting the place, the NGO is financially challenged to keep the facility, leaving the children in a limbo. Emmanuel Bright-Kweku visited the home, which was once a safe haven, but now stands in ruins, and filed this report.
Solomon Evans sits distraught in the porch of a place he once called home, anxious of where next to lay his head. A facility he has in the past 4 years hoped to live in permanently is up for demolition by its owners.
The whole thing is like a dream. Like I'm just waiting for someone to wake me up.
After his parents abandoned him years ago, the 29-year-old living with cerebral palsy navigated life's challenging paths and defied his mobility difficulties to become an IT supervisor at a private university. The detached house with at least 10 spacious rooms and other facilities he stayed in provided a convenient abode for him and at least 30 other children he called siblings.
This hostel full of my colleagues in school, so basically day in and day out, I often go to the hostel, play with them, and when time for me to come, I come back. So living will be a big blow to me.
The facility located at Kenyasi was handed to the Apiahini CP Respite and Home, the only private facility in the Ashanti region that provides special care for very dependent children with cerebral palsy. It follows a 4-year contractual agreement with the property owner in collaboration with the social welfare unit at the Kwabri East municipality. After investing all her resources into the initiative to support the special kids, founder Martha Opoku-Agyeman is now financially drained to keep the facility. She, together with the kids, faced the daunting reality of eviction after they failed to pay up for the facility.
We have nothing because caring for these children is very expensive. With some of the caregivers that we have to pay them well so that they'll be able to have the heart to support. If I can't go much, if I can't go further, I had only 4 people who were in with the hands from the area, women. So finance is very difficult. Personally, I sold my clinic, I sold my land, to get into this project to help these children. So we have nothing as we speak now.
Solomon takes me to the room he used to occupy, which already had its roof ripped off.
Even the entire vicinity was given us free of charge. I can be bold to say within 1 year, the owner would have recovered any loss being given out. Looking, it's just unfortunate that it had to come this far. And
the special home brought relief to parents and guardians of these children.
If you should give birth to such children, you cannot do anything. If you leave them home, you have to rush back from wherever you are.
Sorry, none of pen, Madame Friend say, you too. So never be informed Fentino. Say, meeting the men could feel fat.
I came here days ago to visit him, but I wasn't told of anything. It was just this morning I had a call from the founder. They are being evacuated. I am really worried right now.
Speech therapist at the facility, Emilia Ashiagbo, explains the situation could impact their care for the differently abled children.
Use articulators. That means the lips, the tongue, they are all weak. So we start with massaging for them. We do maybe sound imitating with them. Maybe we do speech, a little speech identification of items. It means they can't forget. Speech is a consistent therapy. So it means we are going to break and they might forget some of the things we have taught them. So it means we have to go back.
Catering to the needs of children with cerebral palsy requires technical expertise and patience, but with no suitable establishment by the government to contain the special kids, the place was a sanctuary for them. Stephen Edujemfi is a social welfare director at Kwabri East.
Children with disability requires a special training for people to handle them. Okay, Kumasi Children Home is not like that, though we are managing to take care of such people that gets there. But this facility is specially meant for people with cerebral palsy or people with disability. That's what the focus is. So if you ask how we are managing to take care of such people, we are doing our best. But like we see, our best is not enough.
With their belongings already ejected from the house, the kids, their caregivers, and guardians are unsure of their next place of abode.
For today, we have to get a hotel for the children for now. Maybe use about 3 days. And then we speak to the social welfare is also trying to get a space for us. But I prefer that we get support from president, from people, from institutions, from, churches, to have a permanent space for these children. I don't want us to get into anybody's house to unpack and then pack again. We're tired.
The special kids and their parents are appealing for aid to support them to find a permanent place of abode convenient for their physical, social, and cognitive development.
You question God, why? But I know he has been my helper since, so I know this is just like something big is coming. I don't know what's coming, but I can hope so.
For Joy News, my name is Emmanuel Bright Kweku.
That something big could come from you. If you have the means, please reach out and help these children. On that note, let's get into our business update now with Benjamin Akako.
Well, from Forex, let's head into our stories. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has kept its key lending rate to commercial banks unchanged. It left the rate at 27% after a meeting to review developments in the economy over the past 2 months. Now, speaking at a press conference, the Bank of Ghana Governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, noted that the inflationary challenge was under control somewhat, hence the need to hold the rate steady at 27%.
The stronger than projected growth and generally improved macroeconomic conditions are spilling over positively to the banking sector. To sustain this effort, the Bank of Ghana will continue to ensure that banks with capital gaps adhere to their committed recapitalization plans to shore up solvency. Supervisory activities will be intensified to ensure that banks continue to address the high NPLs, which poses potential risk to stability of the industry. The improvement in the domestic macroeconomic conditions is also expected to bolster debt servicing capabilities of corporate and household sectors, which would help mitigate further buildup of NPLs within the industry. The inflation profile remains elevated, largely driven by food price movements, especially in the last quarter of the year. The climate-related factors, including the dry spell in some parts of the food-growing regions of the country and the late onset of rains, negatively affected production, while supply chain weaknesses generally affected food prices. While the inflation outturn for the year 2024 deviated from target, it is expected that the disinflation process will resume, contingent on renewed efforts at fiscal consolidation, which is anticipated in the new administration's economic policy agenda and the yet-to-be-presented 2025 budget statement. The bank's latest inflation forecast shows a steady decline and return to the path of disinflation with an extended time horizon of achieving the medium-term target of 8 plus or minus 2%. Under the circumstances, the committee decided to keep the monetary policy rate unchanged at 27%.
The government also recorded 47.5% oversubscription of treasury bills as sales for the fourth consecutive time this year. Data from the Bank of Ghana showed that the government got 8.855 billion cedis. However, this came at a high cost. There's more in this report.
The government was seeking to raise about 6 billion Ghana cedis, but accepted 8.163 billion cedis. A chunk of the funds will be used to finance maturing bills. About 4.896 billion came from the 91-day bill, representing 56.30% of total bids submitted. However, 4.479 billion cedis were accepted. The 182-day bill also witnessed bids worth 1.758 billion cedis tendered. About 1.756 billion cedis were accepted. The 364-day bill received bids more than the 182-day bill, with about 2.110 billion cedis tendered. 1.927 billion cedis were, however, accepted. Meanwhile, interest rates continue to rise on the yield curve. The yield on the 91-day bill shot up by 10 basis points to 28.51%. That of the 182-day bill also increased to 29.77% from the earlier 28.97%. The rate on the 364-day bill also increased by 23 basis points to 30.40%.
And that's how we cap it off when it comes to business. But I'm going to add my voice to Sweetie Abochi and what she said about our brothers and sisters with the spectrum issues in the Ashanti region, especially for business people. Let's reach out. Let's help our own. Handing over back to Sweetie Abochi.
Thank you so much, Benjamin Akako. Now let's get into our news review segment because it's a wrap for the AM News. And who's joining us? Vincent Ekwasefua, former Deputy Minister for Local Government, and Engineer Ebenezer Edu, member of the NDC National Youth Working Committee. Please stay.
Welcome on the news review belt of the show, and my guests are joining me for a conversation. I'll be starting off with Engineer Minister-designate. He's a member of the NDC's National Youth Working Committee, and he joins the conversation. Ebenezer, good morning. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you've become accustomed to from your first stint on the show, I'll give you a minute and a half to share your thoughts on something you find to be a burning issue, something you are concerned about, or something you'd like to basically talk about.
Good morning once again, especially to my people in Hinterland. And they are looking forward to this, and then I thank them for their support. I think that I'll have to congratulate Honorable Akufo-Addo.
Okay.
The Minister-designate for Lands and Natural Resources. Yesterday, we all were at the Parliament House for his vetting, and then we all saw how excellently he performed. And there's no doubt that he's the man cut out for the job. We believe that he will do a lot of good to Mother Ghana. And then he said something basically on how we are going to make sure that we bring down to an end of galamsey activities in Ghana. And I think that is an exciting news. We should all support him. Yesterday, there was a question posed to him that if any of the powers that be are involved in illegal mining, in case they are involved in illegal mining, what will he do? And then we all saw the answer he gave. Nobody is above the law. Our lands are getting devastated, and then we should all come together to support, to make sure that areas that galamsey have taken over, we put them in shape for the next generation, Ben.
Well, interesting thoughts there. Of course, when you talk about lands and natural resources, there's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot of work that he is going to have to do. Yesterday, we had a conversation with the likes of Awula Sewa of Eco-Conscious Citizens, the likes of Dr. Kenashigbe, Ghana Coalition Against Galamsey, and others. Samuel Bekwe on one end. All of these people very passionate about the scourge of illegal mining and how to deal with them. So literally, he has his work cut out for him, and we wish him the very best.
Yeah. And Ben, I think that what we should all do is that we come together, because we've been paying lip service to a number of things. I mean, I come from an area that galamsey activities are ongoing. And I think that it's about time that we redefine, because as a professional mining engineer, if I can mine safely with the multinationals in the various forest zones, and there is no complication or degradation to the land, and there is no harm to the environment, why can't we do the same when it comes to small-scale mining? So I think that those are the things that we should differentiate. And I think that most of the times, people get confused when it comes to illegal mining and galamsey, or illegal mining and then small-scale mining, or galamsey.
Illegal mining is galamsey.
Galamsey, right. You understand? And those are the areas that we need to differentiate. And I am also glad that he spoke about the reference that, let's say you, Ben, I'm not saying, have almost about 20 licenses, and then you'll be mining in various spots in the forest zone. And then, even though they are legal, are you saying that you are doing a small-scale mining, or you are doing a large-scale mining? So we need to differentiate that to make sure that we leverage from the small-scale mining, you come to the medium-scale mining, and the multinational mining, that is the large-scale mining. So I think that we will all help him. And he has people like Dr. Tony Urban, Hajo and co, all supporting to make sure that we get there. So I'm very, very excited. Especially, you can see my passion, because I'm a mining engineer. I'm so happy that we have somebody who understands the whole business of lands and natural resources, and we will get there.
I just want to shave off a final bit, and then we'll get into the newspapers.
Okay.
Being a mining engineer and also being a member of the National Democratic Congress, you've seen some of what has happened in recent times where some, and again, you cannot say they are all NDC boys, because others,
sure,
to make it appear. But let's say that some members of your party have also felt, our party is in power now, and so it's time for us to also take over some of those mining spots and do, after all, it's illegal, right? So government go, government come, let's take over. How do we deal with that? If not, we'll have a problem where once there's a change in power, these kinds of things will occur. How do we deal with that situation?
I think that he answered that question, and he needs to have a thick skin, because me and you know that galamsey is a serious business in Ghana. For me as a professional, I don't have a problem when the person is mining legally and responsibly. Because if it is legal, it is responsible. For example, in the mine where I work in Daman, you have EPA people coming there, most often than not. You have Minerals Commission people coming there. You have other agencies making sure that they come quarterly to supervise what you are doing per the LI to see that everything is going on.
But that's quarterly.
Yeah.
And you are major mines.
Yeah.
Some of these other small-scale miners.
So can't we...
You come today, they'll get things in order. By the time you are gone, they are doing something
So the thing
else.
is, can't we transcend the same process to the small-scale area? And I think that that's the conversation that he was having with the vetting committee yesterday. And I think that if you go to America, or if you go to South Africa, Botswana, wherever there is mine, there are small-scale mines there, but they do it responsibly. We can mine and mine responsibly.
Sustainably.
It's sustainably. And I think that is the conversation. That's why I said we need not to pay lip service to it. We need not to go and do business as usual. You take military men to water bodies, you take military men to forest zones, and you think that once they clear up those people, they will not come back. That is what is happening. And another thing the NDC government is going to do is that we are going to decentralize when it comes to licensing. So at the various district offices or district assemblies, we are going to make sure that we have the small-scale mining board there, so that we will have somebody who have an eye on those who are mining. And I think that if we do that, because over the years, the powers has been in the hands of the Minerals Commission. And Minerals Commission is in Accra. How many offices does the Minerals Commission have, even though they have regional offices and some district offices? So I think that the supervision is more important. And as I said, I believe in Amabua. We need not to pay lip service to this. We have to make sure that finally, we help the next generation. Because if we don't take the action now, Ben, I don't think that in the next decade, we are even going to get water to drink.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Let's get into the newspapers now. I'll start with you. Which paper would you start with?
I think that we've spoken much more on the mining issue.
Okay,
and
so
then
you want to start from there.
So yeah, because
But first, let us know which paper, and then
All right.
give us the headlines generally before we get into.
So this is the Chronicle newspaper.
Right.
He said, technical committee to oversee drafting of law to set up gold board inaugurated. That was yesterday. And then he said, first phase of Bankra inland port ready in March. Contractor appeals to president to fast track its completion. And then we will deal with illegal miners ruthlessly. That's Amabua. So I'll take that one.
Ruthlessly will be.
Ruthlessly means the question that you asked me, that we are not paying lip service to anything. I mean, nobody is saying that party people do not get into mining. But as I said, if they are mining responsibly, they are mining sustainably, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think that I believe in Amabua, he will do that for us. And then the technical committee on the gold board. The gold board is something that the NDC government promised during the election period. And it's indeed in our manifesto. And once again, I'm happy that the president has made sure that a young blood is heading PMC. That's in the person of Sammy James. He's a lawyer. He knows the laws of Ghana. He knows what he's going into. And yesterday, together with the finance minister, they set up the technical committee to oversee the drafting of the gold board. And I think that that is something that is also going to help the country, because if the gold board is going to control all the various golds that comes in, to make sure that we show up our reserves, to maintain whatever we have here, and make sure that we are able to balance our books, is going to help us.
Well, in that regard, it's also important to add that over a certain period, I don't know whether it's a year or two or more, but within that period, gold has doubled what it gives us as a country.
Sure.
100% plus increment in terms of revenue, while cocoa, for example, has shrunk, it has dwindled. But that is partly also on the back of the low production of cocoa. Like you know, last year, 2023, 2024, 2024 ending, things were not very good for that sector. And we're hoping that in 2025, hopefully, we can bounce back. So gold right now, to our economy, where we are, IMF-supported program, it is crucial to us. But what can you tell us about the first phase of the Bankra land port? Can you give us details of that story? Maybe you can read a little bit of that story for us.
Okay. So first phase of Bankra inland port ready in March. This story is from Sebastian, from Kumasi. First phase of phase 1 of 308 million Bankra integrated and logistics terminal, otherwise known as the Bankra Inland Port Project at Bankra in Ejusu municipality of Asante region, is expected to be completed by the first quarter of this year. Dr. Jesse Samu, Chief Executive of Jesmo Construction Limited, the contractors executing the project, has announced the first phase, currently at 78% complete, includes storage facility, security zone, and the terminal, adding that the phase will be operational after the completion, and that the phase 2 is expected to be completed by 2026. So we all know the story of Bankra, and for me as a Ghanaian, I'm so happy that something like that is coming up. But the execution, as the contractor said, we are a new government coming in. I don't know which jurisdiction that this area is under. I don't know whether it's under Lands and Natural Resources or
would have to
so whichever
be careful before we
yes, whatever ministry it is under, or Roads and Transport, or whichever ministry the Bankra Inland Port is. I think that the contractor is pleading that government facilitate its completion. It's been something that has been hanging for some time, and I think that it's a project that is in the.
Because I heard of this project. It's been quite a while. Yeah, I've been hearing of this project.
Bankra has been like almost 15 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's been quite a while.
Yeah, quite a while. And if we are able to make sure that we complete that project, it will ease that traffic at the terminal port, because the plan or the idea was to bring certain cargoes or containers to that area so that people from Burkina and the Sahel regions will come there and then take their goods. So we will pay heed to it. I think that the new minister is going to look at it, and then we'll take it up from there.
I see. The new minister is going to look at it, and then we'll take it up from there. I also have some newspapers here. I have the Daily Graphic newspaper. I also have the Graphic Business as well. And we're going to be contemplating all of these papers, even as we also bring in the rest of our guests. Shortly, I'll be bringing in Vincent Eko Asifua, who has been a former deputy minister for local government. He also joins the conversation. And of course, my colleague, my co-host, Sweetie Abochi, is also here. Sweetie, you played hide and seek with me.
Yes,
Finally,
yes.
You've been found.
Finally, I'm here. And I was enjoying the conversation up to the point where we got in. So maybe you can just take it off from there.
Okay, then very quickly, you could bring in Vincent and let him share his thoughts.
Welcome aboard.
Good morning.
I like your
Alhaj.
Very good. Alhaji.
Alhaj Asifua.
Good morning, Vincent.
So usually we give our guests a couple of minutes to reflect on any topical issue that, you know, is top of mind. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, let me say a very good morning to your cherished viewers. Yesterday, I think that I monitored the news, and I realized that issues of Galamsey is very topical. It seems it is also coming to the fore. I think that as a nation, we should be so much interested in issues of Galamsey. I remember in 2017 when the SWA government indicated that it was going to wage a war against Galamsey. A lot of people felt that it was not going to be possible. Indeed, the fight was very difficult to the extent that I do not think that the NPP government won that fight. Even when it decided to review the mining laws of the country, to the extent that it even made punishment stiffer for persons who were supposed to have been caught dealing with issues of Galamsey. At the point, remember, we set up even the IMCS, the Ministerial Committee, just to make sure that, I mean, some amount of focus will be given to issues of Galamsey. I have seen a number of videos from some of these areas, and even yesterday I saw that the Awowin Traditional Council even mentioned that the Member of Parliament, they allegedly is accused of being engaging in issues of Galamsey, and for that matter, they are calling on him to appear before the Traditional Council for some of these issues to be sorted out.
Right.
And so I wish that the media will also take a keen interest. I think that Erastus Asaridonko is very keen on issues of Galamsey, and I hope that as a nation we will know that this is a serious fight that we need to be able to tackle it. It was a campaign promised by the current administration. We'll give them our support because it's an issue that's affected every Ghanaian.
Okay, thank
just
you for
a quick
adding your
one.
voice.
Are you Catholic?
Yeah, I'm a Catholic.
Okay.
Oh.
I did not know. It's the rosary on your hand, tied to your hand, that got me.
I'm a Catholic, I'm a former seminarian, I'm a master, I'm a Knight of Marshall.
Minor seminary?
Yes. Minor seminary.
I see.
Done about 4 years there.
So Alaji doesn't, you're not Alaji then?
No, not Alaji. I'm not Alaji.
Right. I don't know whose paper is, let me start with mine.
Yes.
Yeah, the New Republic. Kandapa, oh, here we go again. This newspaper again. Yes. Kandapa lied. New footage reveals gavel by gavel account of how rogue national security agents kidnapped Emirates boss. Hopefully today the story is in the newspaper. It is. It says the National Security Ministry hurried attempts to distance itself from the disturbing abduction of Emirates Airline Service manager Mrs. Sylvia Patience-Ban last November has been shattered by damning video evidence. I wish I'd seen that video. Traffic cameras along the routes used by the perpetrators have captured the entire nefarious operation with chilling clarity. I think we all followed that story last November when it happened. We know that the National Security came out with a statement saying that they had nothing to do with it. It turns out that some people who had been delayed from boarding a flight. I mean, there's so many stories flying around. So let me move on to other stories.
Does the story adduce any? Well, we don't.
They say traffic,
we don't have the video.
Traffic cameras, yeah.
Right. But
that's where
why is it saying the former National Security Minister lied? That's the question.
The evidence not only incriminates national security operatives in the crime, but also exposes the ministry's previous denials as deliberate falsehoods to cover up. So they're inferring all this from the traffic footage. Right. Yeah. So
well, I guess we have to watch that video before we can
make any. Right. So Ghana's new economic direction takes off as President Mahama unveils National Dialogue Planning Committee. Yes. So in line with his 120-day social contract pledge to Ghanaians, President John Dramani Mahama has unveiled a 7-member National Dialogue Planning Committee tasked with organizing the much-anticipated National Economic Dialogue. And the committee is chaired by seasoned economist Dr. Ishmael Yamson. Comprises a diverse mix of experts, including Dr. K.Y. Amwako, a renowned development economist and former executive secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Have you seen the list?
Yes,
what do you make of it?
I think that it's brilliant, and for us as a party, we always try to make sure that whatever we say, we deliver. And even when we're in government and things were difficult, Vincent will bear me witness that we did the Senche Forum. And President Mahama, before being elected, said that he will do a similar thing. And he said it will be in his 120 days. So those activities that he would do in 120 days, this was part of it. And I'm so glad that the committee is out. These are seasoned economists. They bring other people together to make sure that where we are, where the economy is now, we will share ideas and see what we can do together.
Okay.
Mind you, we are in an IMF program now. Right. How are we going to stabilize it? How are we going to make sure that the dollar rate comes down? How are we going to make sure that inflation comes down? Those are the things that these people are about. And I'm so happy that such a committee has been formed.
Mr. Zefwa.
Right.
I've heard some people say that, do we really need a planning committee? Just go ahead and do the dialogue. But this is for you. What do you think?
This wouldn't be the first time I'm seeing something like this. Even before the Senche, there was one in 2012 that happened. I believe that on paper it looks good, but in terms of its practicability, as to how it can bring out the needed results that His Excellency the President really want to achieve is also another big question. I don't think that we will be able to have the needed results from it, especially because we've seen this before. The commitment was not shown that much. More especially because it also happened under the same president in 2014.
What are you inferring from that, the commitment?
I am inferring because I'm inferring from...
A lot of good things came out from Senche.
I don't think so.
Yeah, let me understand from you why you say that the commitment was not shown. What makes you
because you remember at the time when I think the man who died, he was in charge of, I'm just trying to recall the name, one of the cadres. He was in charge. P.V. Obin. And we heard P.V. Obin made several comments at the time that he was not given the room, really, to make sure that what was discussed and agreed upon by the Senche Committee was really implemented the way they ought to have implemented it. I think it's just a job for the boys. They promised the people of Ghana that they were going to allow 60 ministers to work. Today, a good board has been formed, about 21 people. With all unnecessary sincerity, I don't think that you need 21 people to purchase gold. And you can see that the people who were likely to be ministers of state, and of course, because of that promise that I'm going to use 60 ministers
are you saying
to be able to
purchase gold?
What are they going to do?
They are going to draft the gold bond bill.
So I'm just saying.
So if you say that they are going to,
it is part of their. It is part of their mandate.
I think
that they are going to purchase gold from small-scale miners. It is part of their mandate. But I'm just saying that you don't need 21 people to do that. Okay. You don't need about 5 or 7 people to, as it were, plan a national economic forum. But I think that this is the work of presidential staffers or people who work under the Ministry of Finance, because it is the Ministry of Finance per our history and our convention to be able to make sure that we have fiscal consolidation as far as our economy is concerned. And
but,
so if we are going to superintend...
Just to interject, seeing how important this economic dialogue is, do you see the wisdom in the strategy behind it? These people are experts in that industry, in that sector, right? You see the wisdom behind putting their heads together so that the dialogue is very strategic. So we don't just put people together and say, come and say what you want to say, and then we get up and go.
So that's what I'm saying, that on paper it looks good. But I don't believe that it is going to bring about the needed results that it's supposed to churn out, because that's happened before. It happened under the same president in 2014. And so I don't see how it is going to really help the cause of our country. I also don't believe in the competence of even the Ministry of Finance, if they have to.
Wow, now, you don't believe in the competence?
Because they are supposed to be leading this, in my estimation. Because the Ministry of Finance, that is led by Dr. Keselato, is supposed to be leading some of these things. But of course, if we now have to leave it in the hands of people, the supposed technical people or people with some amount of expertise, then of course the Ministry of Finance, we are going to have a budget.
He's smiling. I'm just waiting. Please land on this point for me. Let me get back to
Parliament very soon.
You know what?
In the next 120 days, in our estimation, we start from 7th of January.
Yeah.
There's going to be a budget. I was thinking that this year, the Ministry of Finance will take that lead, will take that role in making sure that there is a quick national economic dialogue, which is being superintended by the Ministry of Finance, so that they can have space in the budgets that we are going to have in March. I mean, in the absence of that, I think that is going to be nothing, much ado about nothing.
You know why I was smiling?
Yes, you were smiling.
Because
now's your take.
Some people told us they have the men, and we also how the economy was. So, for me personally, I think that it's a good thing. It's a collective thing, and these are not party people. These are experts, and that is the difference. And they are going to work in conjunction together with the Ministry of Finance. So, he doesn't have any hope in it. We have the hope. Ghanaians have hope. That's why they elected His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama. Let us see what comes out of it. I think that in the next couple of months, you come here and say that they've done a good job.
Okay. Well, we have you both on record, so we wait to see how that pans out. Ben, any quick comments on this?
But no, I think it's fine. Just the bit. You go ahead.
Yeah, Benny, I think that I just had this thing that we need to correct what Vincent said. The technical committee to oversee the drafting of the law to set up the gold board are not people who are going to purchase gold. I mean, they are people who are going to make sure that they set up the
machinations for that.
Exactly. Yeah. In Ghana, everybody knows that if you want to buy gold or you want to do any transaction with gold, it's through PMC. And now we're going to have the gold board. So that is the correction I want. As a professional mining engineer, I will not sit here so that we are educating the public. I think we are playing the politics, but sometimes there are things that we need to see how we go about it.
Okay, Ben.
I was just going to say, Vincent, that when we talk about ministers, it's specific. So we've had certain specific numbers. Even if, of course, every administration, and I'm not saying it's the right thing, but all of you have had instances where some people who may not necessarily, you can't have everybody becoming a minister. Some would have to head to the state-owned enterprises, some will be on certain boards, some will head certain institutions. I think in the end, what we need to deal with is check the numbers so that it's not about just jobs for the boys and girls, but it's people with expertise, people who can add something, add value, and that should be the issue. It shouldn't be that, oh, they're only sending them there because of this or that. Because if we go down that road, then we can go back, look at certain things and say, hey, that's my little thing.
Right, let's do some other stories. Mahama celebrates Volta region, promises massive development. I listened to him, he said that narrative of the neglect of the Volta region for years is about to change because the Volta region has been pivotal in the development and democracy of this country. Cholera outbreak, 3 dead, or cholera kills 3 at Agona West Municipality. 3 people have been reported dead in Agona West Municipality following the outbreak of cholera and in that town and its surrounding towns in the central region about a week ago. It's been a while since cholera broke out, but still people are dying. I understand there was a vaccine that was coming into the country, or it's already arrived.
But before then, when you are done, just check the Facebook wall of Sami Jamfi. Okay. Yesterday, hold on, just a minute. When you are done, just check the Facebook wall.
Are we still on gold board?
Yeah, just check the Facebook wall of Sami Jamfi.
What does it
what
say?
Is there?
You can read for us. What did
saying that you should just check it out.
For the benefit of our audience who follow the conversation,
I think number 20, is it 22? Hold on.
Is it about what the gold board is supposed to?
Because yesterday it was inaugurated. The technical team was inaugurated, and he had the opportunity to give. So number 21. He said upon its establishment, the gold board will also have exclusive legal rights as a sole assayer, seller, and exporter of gold purchased from small-scale miners.
Agreed. So that's the gold board.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
So
mention, it doesn't mention the
committee.
21 specifically.
Oh, but what did I say?
He said the committee is going to purchase gold.
No, but the committee is going to superintend over the gold board, right?
No, the committee is going, right? The committee is only going to draft the law.
No, but I'm just saying that the committee is going to superintend over the gold board, right?
So the correction he's making is
it's
that
like
the
a board,
committee
right?
is not the one going to lead the charge to buy gold, but they're just going to form and
just
put
like
together the right system.
So I'm just saying that you need 21 people to even draft a legal document.
How many people do you think? How many people do you think?
The workers at the Attorney General can even do that.
What is the apt number you think can, execute this?
3 people can do this.
3 people.
Go to the Attorney General office. They can do this for you.
Vincent.
21 people.
Vincent.
Legal advisor from, the presidency. You have other legal practitioners on it. I don't get it.
This is do me a favor, right? Yeah. And at least I have knowledge of some of these committees that have been set up in the past to draft. Can you remember anyone in the past administration, 8 years, that had 3 people?
Oh, well, I don't remember, but I'm just saying that they promised a lean government.
Because I remember quite a number of them, and I don't remember any that had about 3 people.
Per my experience with drafting, sometimes if you come to the Ministry of Education, the Education Committee of Parliament, when we are drafting bills, you have 2 or 3 people from the Attorney General's office doing these things for us. And so I don't think that you need 21 people to be able to draft a legal document, to be able to regulate, the gold board. I don't think so. 21 people is a huge number. This is something that you can have 3-5 people do the work for you.
And you're entitled to that opinion, so it's okay. The correction has been made.
Yeah, the correction has been made. I'm glad that he has made that correction. And I can see that this is a technical committee. Their work is not going to be for long. I'm sure within a month or 2, it will be done. And then, so this is not a job for the boys. During their time, because they push a lot of people,
I think we can move on from this.
So,
well. So, quick comment on Mahama celebrating Volta region and the outbreak of cholera, and I think that will be it for my newspaper. Yeah, there's also entertainment. Mark Brown sets the record straight on rumors she was involved in Susie Williams' death. Oh, I missed that woman, Susie Williams.
And once again, I'm glad that Eko is here. He's a parliamentarian, a young person as such. And we are all happy that young people are in Parliament. Eko, I think that it's long overdue that cases like cholera at this day and age in Ghana, we hear that 5 people died out from cholera.
This is 3. But last year, we had about 11 or so.
Is it part of the 120-day promise?
I don't know. I think was it the Western region or it had quite a number?
I'm not trying to play the politics here.
No, I'm not playing the politics.
What I'm trying to say is that as a people, I think that it's about time that what we say we'll do for our communities, we do it. I came to your constituency with Pablo to do campaign there.
Oh, okay.
And then we all know the situation. I don't want to go to your conference. When it comes to my area in Anta West, everybody sees what is there. And it is all over Ghana. I think that the issue of sanitation in Ghana should be taken seriously. You go to certain district assemblies and then sometimes garbages that have to be taken off are not taken off on time. Sometimes you go to the market, see the fields that are there. And I think that those are the things that, as a people, we have to pay critical attention to. And I'm looking forward to my minister who will be in charge of sanitation. And then things like this have to be taken care of. I get sad that something like corona can take a life, and we need to value life. As I said this morning, we've been paying a lot of lip service in this country. But mind you, we are all staying in the same community. And what affects Vincent affects me, whether you are MPP or you are NDC. And these are things that we should look at it critically. And I'm also happy that the vaccines have come up. It's not everybody who will take a vaccine. Even me, when the COVID came, it was difficult for me to take the vaccine because I was a bit skeptical. And now that they've rolled out the vaccines, I'm hoping that people will go out for it. But the vaccine alone cannot solve our problem. We should make sure that the fields that is around us are cleared.
Did you eventually take the vaccine?
Because of company policy, so I had to take them.
Well, we don't want any vaccine skepticism.
Yes. But I think this issue is an attitudinal problem. I remember when we were growing up, we had people like tankers. I don't know whether you heard tankers.
Yeah.
But when I had the opportunity to work at the Ministry of Local Government, I realized that the BAC will have to stop with the MMDCs or MMDAs. Unfortunately, they have not been equipped so well. I mean, on paper, it is supposed to be so, that they have been equipped, contract signed and all those kind of things, where MMDAs are having separate contractual agreements with people who are supposed to be dealing with our sanitation at the local level. But when I was appointed as a deputy minister, I went around the whole of Ashanti region to visit the various MMDCs. And I realized that they have a big problem, they have a big challenge in dealing with sanitation in their various localities, simply because they do not have the necessary equipment to be able to do so. As you rightly said, you find refuse dump at a certain place, sometimes even in the middle of the town, or the middle of the road. It will be there. The assembly will watch on sometimes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even a month, and it will still be there. You can see that the assembly want to do something, but they don't have the equipment to be able to do so. And so maybe I will charge your government and my brother Ahmed to look into some of these various contracts that are signed by the MMDAs and service providers, to be able to make sure that, in fact, the tenets, or if you like, the content of those contracts is being adhered to. In the absence of that, we are going to have a big challenge, we are going to have a big problem, and this will not end. It will not end because the MMDAs cannot help the situation. And we are allowing sanitation issues sometimes even to be politicized. It is not about Accra, it is not about Kumasi, and it is not about Takrade. There are a number of our localities that needs this amount of support, that needs that kind of leadership to be able to make sure that the tenets and the contents of some of these contracts that are signed separately by the MMDAs and these service providers is being adhered to. I'm sure that if you're able to do so, you should be able to deal with some of these challenges.
For me personally, I think that it's about time that we decentralize how contracts are signed.
It is. This particular one is decentralized. That's what I'm saying, that because I did not say Ministry of Local Government. I said
because if you sign a contract with a contractor to take up a sanitation project or the sanitation needs of your municipality, and you see garbage at markets on the roadside 1 week, 2 weeks, and they are still there, then what is the point of you having leaders?
There's a big elephant in the room. That's why I'm charging your minister. There's a big elephant in the room. Your minister should be very proactive, should be assertive.
What's the elephant?
Well, I'm no more there, but I'm just saying that.
No, but what? You've seen a problem. You say there's an elephant in the room. What is the elephant?
Bro, take your time. I'm just saying that there are separate contracts that are signed by the MMDAs. It has been decentralized already. So the MMDAs needs the support of the central government, that is the Ministry of Local Government, to be assertive so that the right things are being done at the various
for the sake of time, we have to move forward. All I would say is whether it's KMA, LADMA, TMA, whatever, I agree that it must be decentralized. I always mention the example of Switzerland. They have the cantons.
Yes.
In other words, development, sanitation, all those things come right from the canton. It's like, call it your assembly.
Yeah.
So it's dealt with at assembly level. There was a time where, many years ago, I saw a heap of rubbish. Do you know where? Behind, call it the Jubilee House or the Flagstaff House, right behind.
Really?
Wow. And we even did a story on all of that. But on the sanitation matter...
Series?
Pardon me?
Remember the filth exhibition series?
Yes, yes, indeed. I feel that another angle we should target with this cholera and all of that, why are people allowed, for example, to sell food right by gutters?
And even with
why do we allow them to? Because if you allow them, people will buy. So if they are going to sell by a gutter, for example, can we ensure that the gutters are properly desilted? Whatever processes,
who are selling.
That's where the district assembly, and that's where responsibility from those selling come in. So there's a whole chain of issues we have to deal with there. But let me just leave you with some stories from the Daily Graphic. Minister directs headcount in MMDAs, accountability. Goldbot Technical Committee formed will stop cheap state land acquisition, Akufo-Addo assures. Yesterday, I found it interesting when Samuel Abujinapo, brought up the issues in terms of the legality of some of these sales. But in the end, how practical are those sales? That's the question that some people will ask. It's not about a government official being able to acquire it, but if land in a prime area is worth, let's say, 3 million Ghana cedis, and someone is buying it for 30,000 Ghana cedis, or 80,000 or 100,000, you begin to ask yourself, is this how we want it? And if it goes on like that, and the political class keeps purchasing, what will be left for anybody else? Just some quick ones. African nations seek to connect 300 million people to power by 2030. It's interesting. I see Nigeria, Senegal, Zambia, and other countries here. It brings to mind another study I read some time back. About 600 million Africans suffer from what is called power poverty, energy poverty. It's either they don't have power at all, we have some in Ghana, still not connected to the grid, or they don't have stable power, which means you can't, you don't have stable power.
I did that because
the way you went.
No, because the whole day yesterday when I got home, I didn't have light. Till this morning, I still don't have electricity. It was so frustrating.
I think maybe there's a problem.
Either that or...
Now there's a problem.
Something is amiss.
When you say Dubs, you say no.
Please fix my lights,
Now there's a problem.
A crucial issue. There's an interesting bit here. I'm just giving headlines. Colombia yields to U.S. deportation flights to avert trade war. Colombia initially said they would not accept the flights. In fact, Mexico has not accepted flights. But then President Trump posted threatening a 25% tariff. Now imagine you are competing with all other countries and they are slapping 25% on you. And he said that if after a week they've not done that, he'll make it 50%. I mean,
and as soon as he said that,
it's in 24 hours.
They said bring them.
It's not. Tema Customs collection exceeds 2024 target by 8.64%. That's it from my end.
Maybe we can do the headlines quickly from you and then we go.
He's actually done.
He's done that. Oh, right. And the business, just the headlines quickly so we know.
Well, I just want to talk about.
Unfortunately, our time is gone.
It's one of the headlines. The
land issue. Okay, so you can just give us the headlines briefly on that.
Yes, because I just wanted to talk about issues of morality and principles as a political class. I don't think that is something that we should be condoning. It's simply not right, whether from the MPP and NDC. And from this vetting, you realize that it's not an issue of an MPP thing. Both MPP and NDC has been...
since the 90s.
I mean, yes, there have been corporates about this moral issue. On what basis do you go and buy a land for 40,000, 50,000, when ordinarily, when you go to the market, you have to be buying it for maybe 3 million Ghana cedis or even 5 million Ghana cedis. So I think that, yes, we should be able to find a way whereby the political class will not be buying some of this land. If you want to buy, please go to the market and buy the price that you are supposed to be buying. But to benefit from it because you have an information of such things, of such sales being done, cannot be right, and morally it is wrong.
That there is Vincent Assefuah, former Deputy Minister for Local Government. We also had Engineer Aidu, who is a member of the NDC Youth Working Committee. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. Please stay. Sports comes up next.
Time now to bring you sports here on the AM show with me, Muftaro Nabila Abdullahi. Have you visited the Accra Sports Stadium recently? Well, that facility that the Ghanaians have nicknamed the country's Wembley actually appears to be a refuse dumping ground, especially for the area designated for the first gentleman of the land. My colleague Haruna Mubarak paid a visit to the facility and filed this report.
This is the presidential entrance, but there's nothing presidential about it.
At the moment, it doesn't seem like it is in a good shape to accommodate the president. It has become a dumping yard. The likes of broken plastic chairs, faulty fridge, and faulty chairs have all filled up this particular passage of the presidency. And that is a state of play of the Accra Sports Stadium.
The Accra Sports Stadium, known as the nation's Wembley underwent a massive facelift worth 12.5 million Ghana cedis for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in 2018. However, it appears more like a dumping ground for waste than a clean and a welcoming space for players, officials, guests, and spectators. The water supply, along with the electricity room, is also nothing to write home about. The room has no light, exposed wires are scattered everywhere, and there is even a hole dug in a mini room.
And then some people came and they dug and they broke the concrete. As I speak, the cameraman will come and then just show you a bit about it, and it's amazing. We don't know what went on here. As you can see, it's very bad. But we don't know what happened here. I see that this thing was, they tried digging a hole, breaking the concrete, cutting the metal, the iron rocks. We don't know what went on here. So as I said, this is the main power supply and then water supply. But we don't have light here. Please, you have to forgive us. As you can see, you can see bottle wraps.
The room near the scoreboard light is yet another example, filled with filth and riddled with holes dug by rats.
So this is the hole for the rat? Yes. Is a rat or what? Yes, rat. Bush rat.
What seems even more alarming are the cracks, indicating how weak the structure has become.
The place is cracked.
Someone can fall inside.
This is a
please, when you are stepping, look at irons. Yes. Please don't go forward then. There's a hole under where you stand.
A piece of the decorative metal from the stadium has also fallen. The washrooms are poorly maintained with an almost unbearable stench.
Please, step away.
Offices, including that of the head of the technical department, are in terrible condition with disconnected electricity, damaged ceilings, and broken tiles. Those in charge for keeping the facility clean appear not to have executed their jobs.
I don't know the name of the contractor, but when they started working, I came here and watched whatever they were doing. So after everything, I had information that the job is done. So I said, okay, let me come and look at the job that is done. So when I go here, I see that there's nothing here proves that there's something here. Even the pen that they use is a inferior pen. So we as a group, we want the contractor to come, the big man to call the contractor to come and tell Ghanaians what happened or what went on. That's all.
GPMG, Ghana first. GPMG, Ghana first.
The Ghana Project Monitoring Group is a dedicated organization committed to raising awareness about faulty and abandoned projects across the country. They are hopeful of collaborating with the Sports Ministry to address the issues of filth and disrepair.
Information has been sent to the Sports Ministry. The Sports Ministry have sent a delegation here that the items down there, we actually don't see them as items. They are kind of garbage, and they have sent an information here that those garbages will be taken away from here, and they are going to first of all send in auditors to come and audit all that is here before these items are being taken out of here. Well, however, we have still been here. We've been waiting for them to come in with the auditors. No information has been sent since then. But our question is that, are they ready to help Mother Ghana? If we are still standing here expecting them to come and bring in the auditors and let this happen. And we are expecting the auditors to come in. They said they were here a couple of minutes ago, and they said they'll be coming in again. We've still been here. We are hoping they'll come here and meet us, and the auditors do what they have to do. Then we'll all know the way forward, how to get this garbage out of here.
What I would urge the incoming NSA boss
and then the sports minister. They should get more people employed here so that they can take care of the facilities. Apart from that, the stadium itself needs another renovation again. Because when you enter inside most of the offices, the computers are not working, the lighting system is not all that good. Everything is mess. So I'm very worried because I'm a sportsman. As a president of an organization, I've been here for all this year. A lot of things has happened here, which maybe at some time we put it on the media for everyone to share what we also went through as a team. Because when you come to the administration, the technical side, and you need the support for your team, or they tell you that you don't get the needed support from the previous government, there is nothing that they can help. Talk about even in their machines, their computers, it's not working. Everything is a mess. So we are expecting much from the government of John Dramani Mahama, so that they should take a look at the stadium very well and take a look at those who are working here. Their life, the condition of the workers here is bad. They don't have the machines, everything just to work on it. They don't have anything. Everything is mess, including those of us who are in the sports. So the sports minister and then the incoming, the National Sports Authority boss should also, you shouldn't be at his office. You should go around and check the facilities before you take office.
Western country, the police will stand and direct you not to do the wrong thing. But in Ghana, the police will hide so that you do the wrong thing and then you arrest you. Why am I saying this thing? People know the wrong thing, things that are going wrong, they are around them. They won't draw the attention of the authority to come in and do anything. Why? You wouldn't know, because some people feel like if I say it, I may lose my job. Or some people also sit on the money being released to do those things. That if you talk about it, and then somebody have spent the money, as you can see, you've betrayed the person. So our motive is to draw the attention of the authority, the government, that there's something wrong here. What can we do? But not just drawing the attention, we use our own hands to start something, waiting for the government to come and then assist us.
Now, in March this year, the Black Stars will host Chad in a home match in the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. At the moment, the state of this facility is not in shape to host that particular high-profile game. The nation would have to fix these issues if indeed they want to host that particular match here at the Accra Sports Stadium. Haruna Mubarak for Joy Sports.
And talking of CAF Exco, as you heard from the CAF president, Kete Okriko, as we have reported many times, is vying for position on the CAF Executive Committee. He confirmed on his social media pages yesterday that he's passed the integrity test and he will be contesting for a CAF Executive Committee seat on March 12th. That is when the CAF Extraordinary Congress will be happening. And it is going to take place in Cairo, Egypt. So Kete Okriko, barring any unforeseen circumstances, is going to be a CAF Executive Committee member on March 12th because he's running for the position unopposed as a representative of Wafu Zone B. Now, we'll wrap up with the Africa Paralympic Committee, where they have a new technical leader. My colleague, Elon Banai, the Famako, has details in this report.
The ceremony held at the NPC Ghana Secretariat in Accra marked the beginning of Professor Kim's one-year tenure, during which he will provide technical expertise to develop and promote parasport in Ghana. Professor Kim, who was deployed by the Korean government through KOICA, brings a wealth of experience in parasport development. Speaking at the ceremony, he expressed his excitement to be in Ghana and contribute to the development of parasport in Africa.
I am very happy to be here, and also I am so excited to do, I can do something for Ghana and Africa Paralympic sports. And I can see, when I got here, I can see the excitement from the street, from the people. So I can see the future of Ghana, and then I can see the future of parasports in Africa, all areas. So from the street and from the Ghana. So I am very happy and I'm so excited. So I will do my best, and during my work, I'll be very happy. I can see I could be very happy in the future. And next, like 1 year, I'll be very happy for it, okay? And I'll do my best. And then, wait. I cannot do this by myself, and I need your help. So please advise me what to do, or ask me what to do, and you have to guide me to develop the para sports in Africa. Okay, thank you very much.
The NPC Ghana has outlined several expectations from Professor Kim's tenure, including providing technical advice, capacity building, and developing a roadmap for Ghana's qualification events for the 2026 Commonwealth Games, 2027 African Para Games, and the 2028 Paralympic Games in USA.
What he is here and the corporation is about to do is to put Ghana in the shape where our athletes will have the psychological mentality of targeting the podium. Where our athlete psychology can be developed, we can develop the best athletes to make sure that they fall into the right classification. Where our athletes can go through the needed techniques that is so for the sports. And for that matter, the question he posed, yes, it is for Dr. Yuan, but I want to place it on record and to explain. But maybe he will want to also chip in the basic knowledge where we will all have to also get to take home.
Thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be bringing you some exciting conversations. But first, let me tell you about the Medicas Hospital, a modern healthcare facility built with your recovery in mind. And guess what? They have spacious wards built with your family in mind, a warm and caring pediatric unit built with your children in mind. And they also have assembled some of the brightest minds in medicine, led by Dr. Yao Safo, the drive-time doctor, to serve you. They also offer general medical services as well as specialist services in plastic surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, child health, urology, psychiatry, that's mental health, and eye care. But there's still more. They also offer a comprehensive medical diagnostic service encompassing endoscopy, medical laboratory services, x-rays and scans. And they also have a 24-hour pharmacy, ensuring you always receive efficacious, safe, and affordable medicine. They bring to you as well the most powerful medicine of all, simple human kindness and empathy. They pride themselves on holding themselves to the highest attainable standards, and they accept all forms of payment, including from private health insurance companies. All you have to do now is locate Medicas Hospital at number 10 Kinso Street near the Ashaleboche School Junction. You can also reach them via phone on 0501 477 340. 0501 477 340. On social media at Medicas GH. Medicas Hospital, a place of healing. Well, so now let me tell you a bit about the Africa Prosperity Network. They are fostering economic integration through Africa's single market. That is the AfTA. But before we get into the studio, let's watch this.
We have recorded tremendous success in ensuring that the vision of our founding fathers does indeed become a reality.
We welcome you to the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues and the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards, which take place in Accra, Ghana from the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025.
I will work to foster the partnerships that transcends our borders. And I'll work collectively with you towards regional stability, economic growth, and mutual respect.
We see our role in enabling Africans to have a better future.
We indeed have what it takes. There is no dream which is too big or impossible.
On occasions like these, we give ourselves an excellent opportunity to showcase the difference we can make.
To register, visit africaprosperitynetwork.com. Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025, delivering Africa's single markets through infrastructure. Invest, connect, integrate.
Well, let's get you invested, connected, and integrated. Joining me in the studio, I have Kofi Nyakopong. He is Chief Operations Officer with the Africa Prosperity Network. We also have Prince Moses. He's a Director, Communication Directorate with the Africa Prosperity Network. And let me add that Kofi Nyakopong is Dr. Kofi Thank
you very much.
Yeah, I know we are very passionate about. But let me start with the Africa Prosperity Network. What is it? Why was it even established? I'll start with you, Doc.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to you. Good morning to your viewers out there. Well, Africa Prosperity Network is a non-for-profit organization, and we were established in 2022 with the objective of promoting the Africa we want, as outlined in the AU Agenda 2063, okay? And this is all in line to promote Africa's economic integration through the creation of the world's largest single market of now about 1.45 billion people, okay? So it's all about promoting Africa's economic integration and our shared prosperity. And, you know, the Africa we want in line with the AU Agenda 2063. That is what we primarily focus on at APN.
All right, so at APN, the Africa Prosperity Network, you've also given birth to the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. And this year as well, you're doing that. But why are these dialogues important?
Very well. So Africa Prosperity Network as a secretariat, you know, we drive advocacy initiatives throughout the year. We hold a series of meetings, conferences to convene together the political leaders on one side and business leaders on another side. Now, throughout the year, we have a number of events, but the biggest, our flagship event, is the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. Now, this is a very unique conference or event, okay? It's a very deliberate platform where we bring together the movers and shakers in Africa, okay? From the private sector, we are looking at captains of industry, we're looking at heads of multilateral institutions, we're looking at top CEOs, and then we bring together the public, the policy leaders and the political leaders on one side. They sit together, they dialogue, and they find mutual ways to promote the single or push forward the single market agenda forward. Now, why Africa Prosperity Dialogues is so important is that it is very unique in the sense that it is not just a talk shop. Okay, we focus, it's an idea laboratory, if you like, where we focus.
That sounds interesting.
Yes.
An ideas lab.
Yes, an ideas lab, if you like, where we focus on actually practical discussions leading to actionable policies and bankable projects. And so when we do this thing, we know that, you know, we are driving the single market agenda forward for the betterment of our continent, for our shared prosperity. And that is why this platform is very, very deliberate and uniquely set up. And it's the one place, you know, positioned at the beginning of the year where you have all the top CEOs in the private sector meeting with the policy leaders, the political leaders, the heads of state from government. So they sit and then deliberate to push together this agenda.
Interesting. And it's not just the talk shop. It's also about actionable things that can be done. Well, let me come to you, Prince. Since we're talking about the Africa Prosperity Dialogues, what would you say over the years has been the impact of the dialogues you've already had? You're about to have yet another one. And what partnerships make these dialogues possible?
Right. So let me start by explaining what the Africa Prosperity Network's inner circle partnerships are made of. First of all, we've got the Advisory Council, which is chaired by Her Excellency Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, with a lot of highly important African personalities. And so these are people who are able to bring a lot of important people from across the world, that is Africa and global Africa, which are our focus, around the table to plan, decide on how we want the Africa we want to be. So last year, let me just focus on one impact. We decided to focus on interoperability, which had been one of the biggest ideas we'd had, and that had led to incredible discussions, practical discussions during Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2024. And so we decided to take it on and do advocacy for interoperability of payments across the continent. Now, the impact we had has been incredible. We took the outcome document to the people that matter. We took it to the AU. It was presented at the AU. And then afterwards, we started our international and continental advocacy. We met with about 27 policymakers in the telecommunications sector across Africa and internationally as well. After which we created some real partnerships, created a committee, and then we organized the interoperability symposium. We took that outcome to the AU as a series of policy proposals. And that policy proposal is to be presented at the AU Summit of Heads of State in February this year. So that is the impact we're talking about. And so you'd realize that through, say, from July last year, we had a lot going on in interoperability, a lot including a partner that we helped launch a swap system where Ghanaians can buy in Nigeria with a Ghanaian CD, Nigerians can buy in Ghana with a Nigerian dollar, Nigerian naira, sorry. We're planning on taking this across Africa, and actually it's happening. You know, it's happening through
that
PAPS.
feeds into the interoperability and also integration, right?
And so it's happening, absolutely. It's happening through PAPS. PAPS is a great partner of ours, and PAPS is, I think, an agency of the Afro-Exim Bank, who is also a very big partner of ours. Right. And so PAPS, you know, Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, is working on a mechanism that would allow us to trade in our own local currencies.
And of course, that also feeds into the African Continental Free Trade Area discussion. But tell me, for 2025, what are the key objectives, briefly, of the APD, the Africa Prosperity Dialogues?
That is going to focus on infrastructure.
Okay.
Now, historically, you'd realize that our infrastructure was built in two ways: for extraction and transportation towards the littoral, that is the coastal area, for it to be transported to other continents.
Feeding the colonial agenda.
Yes, other than ours. And this colonial era commercial arrangement has remained with us because we have been carved up as a continent into smaller entities. And so this needs to be reorientated towards our regions rather than towards the West. And to do that, last year, our theme was about value addition. And so after value addition, what do? We need to trade among ourselves. And so we need to reorientate these infrastructure systems towards Africa rather than outside Africa. And so this is the premise of our conference, our dialogues for this year.
That restructuring. Let me come to Doug, because then the central theme is infrastructure.
Right.
I'd like your take on that.
All right, very well. So infrastructure is the backbone of Africa's economic transformation. And the World Bank states that we need about 7.1% of our GDP to be invested in infrastructure in sub-Saharan Africa. If you look at the AFDB, they tell us that the funding gap in infrastructure is about $100 billion annually. And so there's a problem, all right? So it presupposes that we need to tackle or centrally focus on infrastructure development. Now, our theme for this year's dialogues is delivering Africa's single market through infrastructure: invest, connect, and integrate. And so if you look at how the program is structured, and we'll get into it in a bit, what we're looking at is the central theme of infrastructure. We want to, one, identify particular infrastructure projects, huge infrastructure projects, that would, when funded and implemented, would help with the single market agenda. Number two, we want public-private partnerships, okay, to come on board, to fund and then, partner to see how they can bridge this gap, all right? And then we are going to talk about, two huge projects, for instance, looking at the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam, for instance, which has the capacity to power the whole of East Africa. And even if you look at the Grand Inca Dam, for instance, that also has the power to potentially power the entire African continent. So once we identify these huge projects, now we need to tackle the funding aspect. So it's about finding the funds and actually building the infrastructure, and not just physical infrastructure like the railways, the roads, the sea, the ports, and then the air. But then we're also looking at digital or soft infrastructure as well. So all these things are encapsulated in infrastructure and will be discussed at length at the dialogues.
Give me an idea. What's the event going to shape up like? What's the outline? What can people expect?
Right. First of all, let me start by saying we're overwhelmed at the responses we are getting. We have over 3,400 participants registered to attend this year's dialogues. Okay, and that is, a huge, upgrade from last year's edition. And so these come from over 46 countries, I must add. All right. So we're going to have heads of state. We're going to have heads of multilateral financial institutions. We're going to have top CEOs in the continent. We're going to have business executives, and even the people from academia also involved, CSOs, and the general public. First of all, we want you to come and experience what we have to showcase this year in terms of the theme, which is on infrastructure. But what is of even particular interest is that we are expanding APD this year. We are starting with an exhibition called Projet Afrique. Now, this exhibition is, supposed to highlight the arts and culture, agribusiness, tech and industry, and so on and so forth. And so Projet Afrique is going to be a unique selling point. We start with Projet Afrique. Now, when we're done, we're going to have a series of breakfast meetings. We have about 6 of them. And all of this is on Thursday, the 30th of January. Okay, so we start with the exhibition, then we go to the breakfast meetings, and from this breakfast meetings, which will touch on PPPs, will touch on venture capital, it's going to also touch on women in trade, on digital infrastructure, and even ALP.
Looks like an all-encompassing.
That's a legal arm of it. And so we have this series of breakfast meetings lined up. Then in the afternoon at 1 p.m., we are going to have the official opening ceremony of the dialogues. Okay. Now, this is where we have the plenary sessions, we have keynote speakers from our major partners, and then we are going to have 2 key panels. Okay, the first one is going to touch on filling the infrastructure gap. Okay, so how do we find the money? And this is going to be, led by, key people in investment banking, people who have huge backgrounds from top multilateral financial institutions. And then secondly, the panel will also be on transportation. Okay. Right. Now we have demand, we have supply. Last year we touched on interoperability. How do we get the person who is selling, goods in Techiman? Okay. Now the demand is in Harare, Zimbabwe. If we have mobile interoperability, the payments can be done. Now, how does he transport those goods from Techiman to Harare? All right, you need the infrastructure necessary to connect our regional market. Right. That is what we'll be focusing on for the first day.
Let me come to you, Prince, because he talks about key personalities who are going to be steering all these affairs. Tell us about some of those key personalities. And again, who can attend? Is it free for all? Is it open to all of these CEOs and others? What's the nature of the event?
So we've got a lot of them. We've got CEOs of multinationals. We've got directors and presidents of multilateral financial institutions. We've got AFDB represented. We've got Afro-Exim Bank represented. We've got Shelter Afrique Development Bank represented. We've got ECOWAS Bank for Investment Development represented. I could go on and on and on. In terms of political leaders, we have about 7 countries represented, and this is at the highest level, so at the presidential level. So we're going to have all these people represented. But let me segue back, or let me go back to something that Dr. Kofi mentioned. And you'd realize the importance of regional infrastructure to this year's theme. Now, we spoke about the Grand Inga Dam. After South Africa went out or came out of apartheid, a lot of people were plugged into the grid. As a result, South Africa has suffered a lot of power outages or load shedding.
They've had challenges. Yeah.
Challenges. And ESCOM, that is their electricity department, has been trying to find solutions. Now, here we have the Grand Inga project.
with an incredible power, I believe 430,000 megawatts to power the entire Africa, and DRC is part of the SADC, SADC. So why don't we look at South Africa's firepower in the area of financing and bring them together with DRC to provide electricity for not just South Africans, but the entire South.
Basically, the same integration partnerships
absolutely
that you're talking about.
We're not naive. We do not think that it's going to be simple, but we should start the conversations. Yeah, and so these are things that we're looking at. We can also look at the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. You see, I don't want to go geopolitical here, but it is important for us to grasp why this has not really taken off as it should, because the colonial masters, in their design of power dynamics, gave 85% of the resources of the Nile to Egypt and to Sudan. And so the Nile Basin countries, I think the number about 7, had to share 15%. Now, how do we harness the power of the Nile for the entire region?
Right.
And so these are things that we also need to focus on. And that is why we talk about actionable policies that lead to bankable projects. Because without this, they can build a Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, but is it going to be bankable?
That's the question. And of course, there are linkages to the AFTA, which we have elaborated upon. But you also have the ACPA Awards and Gala night. Tell us a bit more about that as I also get ready to take your final thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. But let me give clarity to the program outline, and then I'll touch on the outcome.
So briefly on that.
The Thursday is the first. So we have days 1 on Thursday, the 30th of January, and that is starting from 8 a.m. at the Accra International Conference Center. And then we go to day 2 as well, which is also at the same venue, all right? Now, day 3, which is where we call the Presidential and Business Executives Dialogue, is where the heads of states, 7 of them, we are told, are coming into the country, will sit and meet with the business executives to dialogue. On the evening of day 3 is the Presidential Gala Dinner and APCA, which is the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards that you're talking about. Now, here we are going to celebrate a number of individuals who have contributed significantly to Africa's prosperity. And we want to honor them. We want to make sure they are celebrated in order to inspire others, to invest in Africa's future. So it is going to be strictly by invitation, and it's going to be a high-profile event at the Kempinski Hotel, Gold Coast City, on the evening of the 1st February 2025. That's Saturday.
All right. Any final words, Prince?
Register. So go to africaprosperitynetwork.com. You've got all the details over there. You are welcome to attend the Projet Afrique. We chose French because it's very important for us. African integration.
Project Africa.
Yeah, Project Africa. So we had to. So Project Africa or Project Africa. And so it was
either way.
It was a bit, we're like, okay, we need to be very specific over here. And to be specific, we had to go to French, which gives us Africa Project Africa. So we chose that.
Either way, I think it works because
either way works.
As you undertake these projects, you're also projecting.
We are projecting.
What Africa
you're absolutely
capable
right.
of doing.
You're absolutely right. You should join us in the communication department. And then after that, we obviously have the breakfast meetings. Right. These are essential for not just coming to understand what is really happening on the continent, to orientate our businesses towards the right sectors and towards the right ideas, but also to meet the right people. Right. I'm not saying that it's an employment fair, but it would help you understand how to set up your business.
Okay.
Yeah, and who to work with.
Final words, stop.
Yes, I want to say come one, come all. This Thursday is going to be very, very...
You have 3,000 plus. You're asking for more.
Oh, yes.
All right.
AfricaProsperityNetwork.com. Register for the event and be part of history making. That is what I want to say.
Yes.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining the conversation. It's all about the Africa Prosperity Network and, of course, the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. You don't want to miss that. Those who joined us for the conversation, Dr. Kofi Nyakopong, he is Chief Operations Officer at the Africa Prosperity Network. There's also Prince Moses, Director Communication Directorate at the Africa Prosperity Network. Before we segue into the next conversation, select a solar system from our various solar packages ranging from 30,000 cedis to 99,000 cedis. Now, all our solar systems come with lithium-ion batteries. You get a solar water heater, a solar home system, a solar power station, or a solar generator ranging from 1,000 watts to 20,000 watts. We also sell reverse osmosis machines for water treatment. All you have to do, Google Solar Made Ghana to find us on both Facebook and Instagram. To reach out to us, Solar Made Ghana, you can call us on 0508 320 470. Solar Made Ghana is located at Adregano, East Legon. Solar Made, we go everywhere. And we'll be taking you somewhere shortly, right after the break.
This is still the AM show on Joy News, and now we're taking you live to the Graphic Business Stanbic breakfast meeting at the Labadi Beach Hotel. Please enjoy.
That has been touting lots of PPP projects. In fact, the first one I got to know of was the one that leads to my regional capital, Sekendi Takrade. It's been more than 10 years. That dualization has never happened. It was one of those projects. The question is, how do we make public-private partnerships a financing option for sustainable development? This morning we're tweaking things a little bit. We'd have one speaker, after which we'd have a conversation. You know, in the past we've had 3 or 4 speakers in a panel with questions posed to them. We're changing it a little bit, but of course, I still remain your moderator, Winston Amwa. Thank you once again for joining us, and if we are meeting for the first time this year, Happy New Year to you, because we're still in January. And as we do, we'll start with an opening prayer. We'll invite Reverend Ken Okuson, who is Executive Chairman of CRIF. Let's welcome him as he gives us the opening prayer.
May I politely ask that we be upstanding? May I ask that we all, together with one accord, say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. I read to you from 1 Timothy 2, and it says, I urge you, first of all, to pray for all people. 34 million Ghanaians this morning, we pray for all Ghanaians. Ask God to help them. We ask God to help us this morning. We ask God to help 34 million Ghanaians. We ask God to help this country, Ghana. Intercede on their behalf. And this morning, together with one accord, we intercede on behalf of this country and give thanks for them. Pray this way for kings. We pray for the leadership of this country. We pray for His Excellency the President and all who are in authority, so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. This is good and pleases God our Savior. And all shall say, Amen.
Amen. I was looking at the faces of all those who could not recite the Lord's Prayer. Anyway, so we'll move on and we'll invite Asamoah Boahene, who is editor of Graphic Business, to give us the welcome address. Let's welcome him.
Good morning and welcome. And I also wish to extend the gratitude of the management and board of Graphic Communications Group, and to wish you a Happy New Year. So once again, on behalf of the Managing Director of Stanbic Bank, Graphic MD, I'm delighted to welcome all of you to our first quarter event for the year. As we gather here today, we are filled with a sense of optimism, cautious as it may. Businesses are eager to explore the prospects of a new government, and we are no exception. While some may say hope is not a strategy, We believe that by providing a platform for business leaders to discuss and debate, we can turn hope into actionable plans. For over 70 years, we have been committed to publishing credible news that informs and empower our readers. Our platforms, including the graphic business Stanbic Bank breakfast meeting, are designed to deepen the conversations we have in our daily lives, around the dining table, on the golf courses, and in the boardroom. Our goal is to crystallize these discussions and amplify our voices in the national discourse. We are proud to say that our efforts have yielded some tangible results, including the Investor Protection Plan or the Investor Protection Bill, which is currently at the nascent stages. This achievement is a testament to the power of collaboration and the impact we have when we come together to solve national interests. As we begin this new year, we reiterate our commitment to creating opportunities for business leaders to converge and find solutions to our common national problems. We are grateful for our partnership with Stanbic Bank, which enables us to host these meaningful events. And of course, to Multimedia Group for also supporting us. Once again, welcome, and I wish you a happy new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asamoah Ahene, who is editor of Graphic Business. Which means we can introduce our guest speaker for today for his presentation. And our guest speaker is a top management executive with over 25 years of professional experience in assisting businesses and governments to navigate the complex field of transactions, including due diligence work, investment appraisals, and business valuations. His professional services have also covered advice to both selling and buying parties on transactions across a variety of industries such as banking and financial services. He is the country senior partner at PwC Ghana. Let's welcome Vish Ashagbo.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to be here. Good morning to, I know there's a group of people watching us or following us online and on radio, so good morning to everybody. And thank you to Graphic and Stanbic for inviting me to give this short presentation on PPPs and how they can enable, or whether they can enable sustainable development. And I noted the point you just made about having heard about PPPs for a while, but we believe as PwC, based on the work that we've done right here in Ghana and other parts of the world, that indeed PPPs are a good and sustainable source of financing for development. And I have a few slides that I'd like to use in my presentation. So I don't know if the logistics team can help me put those slides up. I have about, I believe, about half an hour or so of presentation time, and then we can get into discussions, and I think that's the more important part. So please feel free to ask questions or make comments as you wish. So let me see if this works. Yeah. Okay, so I've set out my presentation in these few sections, which I think will help the conversation. Essentially, we are focused today on sustainable development with emphasis on the word sustainable. So I will start off by essentially defining what sustainable development entails. It may seem obvious, but I think it's good for us all to be on the same page. What do we mean by sustainable development? Then public-private partnerships. What constitutes a public-private partnership? Again, Winston mentioned that he had been hearing of this for well over 10 years. In actual fact, work has been going on PPPs here in Ghana. Even before that, certainly we have been involved in PPPs as far back as 2008. At that time, we didn't have the legal framework for PPPs, but fortunately today we do. So we have an act of parliament passed in 2020, which sets out essentially what a PPP is and what the characteristics of PPP are and the type of things we should be seeking to achieve in a public-private partnership. So I'll basically touch on some of that, again, just as context. Then I will give some case studies. PPPs are quite complex projects. I'm sure a lot of people in the room will be quick to point to PPPs that either have not worked or have not taken off or have stalled, whatever the people's experience has been. But in actual fact, if you get them right, they can and are very beneficial. So I'm going to just quickly run through a couple of case studies. I have 2 case studies of what I call success stories, and 2 case studies, very brief case studies, not detailed, high-level case studies that where the projects were not entirely successful. And then I'll conclude with what we are aware of from public domain information as to the PPP projects that are currently under consideration and tie it back to sustainable development and financing. Then, of course, please feel free to ask questions and comment when the floor is opened. So sustainable development. What do we actually mean by sustainable development? Okay, if somebody can help me move the slide. The clicker seems to be stuck. Okay, so I've chosen to use a definition from the former Secretary General of the OECD. And for the benefit of those who are listening but cannot see the slide, I'll just read it very quickly. So sustainable development requires that the costs of today's projects do not translate into liabilities for tomorrow. Both public and private sectors need to make long-term investments in infrastructure and social systems that will benefit future generations. Private enterprises must see this not just as a responsibility, but as an opportunity for sustainable growth. So we quite like this definition of sustainable development because it has all the elements that we as a developing nation are looking for and we constantly debate and argue over. So some key terms there. Projects that do not translate into liabilities for tomorrow. That's important. Both public and private sectors need to make long-term investments. So already you can see that there's a connection between public and private. And then it ends by saying private enterprises must see this not just as a responsibility, but an opportunity for sustainable growth. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for as a developing country, or indeed any country in the world, is looking for sustainable growth. So that's the definition I'd like to use this morning in terms of sustainable development. So back to the topic, how do PPPs, or how can we use PPPs, let me use the word enabler, as enabler for sustainable development as defined by the OECD in this case. So, when we refer to sustainable development, what are the underlying sectors that support that? And again, this is basically our own assessment as PwC, and we look from the bottom of the chart up, and for the benefit of those who are listening in rather than watching us, I'll just read it out quickly. So, in order to drive sustainable development in any economy, you must have energy. You must have industry, agric and industry. You must have transportation networks and transportation systems. ICT today is a significant, in fact, today you can't do without ICT if you are to have sustainable development. Then the basics of life, water and sanitation, health and education, and housing. So for us, when we talk about sustainable development and trying to finance sustainable development, these are the sectors that we would be referring to. Now, you may have one or two others, but this is how we have categorized them. And then we go further to categorize them between what we refer to as more commercial leaning and more social leaning. And let me explain that very quickly. So when we say more commercial leaning, if you at energy, you look at industry, you look at transport, and you look at ICT. Those sectors, by the nature of the services and infrastructure that those sectors require, are lean more towards commercialization than, let's say, water, health, education, and housing. That does not mean you cannot have commercial elements in these other three, but certainly it's simpler, easier, more attractive to a commercial party to be on the left-hand side of this chart, which is energy, agric and industry, transport, ICT, than water, housing, education, and housing. Because obviously those are social projects and issues around affordability and ability to pay, et cetera, need to be carefully considered and carefully assessed. These are the underlying elements that we believe drive sustainable development. But at the same time, we also believe strongly that all of these sectors can benefit from PPP financing. And I'm emphasizing financing, but I must also make the point that when you talk about PPPs, it's not necessarily all about financing. There are other elements that go into a PPP, again, which I'll touch on in the course of our discussion. Okay, so because we are focused on financing, and I think in his opening remarks, Winston did a good job on summarizing where we are as a country in terms of our financial challenges. So here we are seeking sustainable development. Here we are seeking to drive investment in those sectors that I just spoke about, in housing, in education, in water and sanitation, in energy, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, we are constrained because we have a budgetary difficulty, and today we are out of the capital markets. So typically, how does government finance public infrastructure or public services? There's a number of ways government can do it and has done it over the years. So domestic revenue sources, that's basically the budget. So government can finance things using the budget. It can raise debt, Euro bonds, etc. That's the sovereign debt piece. It can use grant income from development partners, for example. Commercial debt, the banks and other financial institutions could provide money to government to drive development. Private sector, sometimes private sector steps in, and it could be direct financing from private sector, and I'm kind of distinguishing that from, say, a bank, which is also private sector anyway. Then DFIs, development finance institutions. DFIs, as some of you or many of you in the room or many of you listening may know, are specialized in the sense that they are providing finance for what qualifies, if I can put it that way, as a development project as opposed to, let's say, a commercial project or a full profit making project. So a DFI would typically be looking to finance those social projects that I mentioned, things like water and sanitation, housing, education, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a potential source of financing. And in recent times, we have green financing that has opened up. And as the name suggests, if a project by its features or its benefits and outcomes can demonstrate that it speaks to the ESG agenda, there could potentially be green finance that will be available. When we talk about public-private partnerships or financing from public-private partnerships, it's not necessarily from a single source. It could be from a combination of all of this. So you can potentially have a project that has some government money in it, it has some DFI money in it, and then it has some commercial lender money in it, all in the same project. And each plays a different role. But the overall objective of having that mix of financing is to make the project work so that overall the benefits are realized. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Okay, can you help me with the slide, please? Okay, so sustainable development, back to sustainable development, and how do we assess whether we've actually achieved sustainable development or not. And here are just a few thoughts. So because we are, if you remember the definition I started off with about spanning a long period of time, etc., and generations, etc., the useful life of the asset must span more than one generation, so that it's not like a flash in the pan. We did a project, and then within 1-2 years, the benefits are realized, and that's not sustainable. We want something that spans generations. Same thing for services, so I'll skip the second point. Then the final point we have here is that the total costs and benefits must be distributed equitably across the generations. So again, back to the definition of sustainable development, you don't want a project where one generation benefits from it only to leave liabilities for future generations, which I think is part of the problem we've had in our country over history. Okay, I think I'm going to have to rely on, yes. So let me get into public-private partnerships and what makes it a viable financing option. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I want to start with the definition of a PPP, of a public-private partnership, because again, there have been different views as to what constitutes a PPP and what is not a PPP, et cetera, et cetera. So fortunately for us, in 2020, the PPP Act was passed by Parliament, Act 1039, and that gives us a very clear definition of what a PPP is. So again, for the benefit of those who are listening as opposed to watching, I will read it out. It says, public-private partnership means a form of contractual arrangement or concession between a contracting authority and a private party for the provision of public infrastructure or public services traditionally provided by the public sector, as a result of which the private party performs part or all of the infrastructure or service delivery functions of government and assumes the defined risks over a significant period of time. So it's quite a mouthful, but there's some key words and phrases there, again, that I'll just draw your attention to. So it's a contractual arrangement, so it's a contract. It's between a contracting authority, and when the Act says contracting authority, typically it's referring to a government authority of some kind. It could be, just as an example, Ports and Harbors Authority. It could be Ghana Highways Authority, for example. So that would be those would be examples of contracting authorities for the provision of public infrastructure or public services. So public infrastructure, for example, roads, for example, water, for example, schools, right? Those are typically public sector or government responsibilities. But in a PPP, a private party can provide those services. They perform part or all of the infrastructure or service delivery functions for the government, and they assumed defined risk over a period of time. So PPP is quite different from just providing financing for a project. You must assume some risks. And of course, you are also remunerated in according to performance in line with the risk that you've assumed. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that as we proceed. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, this is just a definition by the World Bank. Obviously, we have our own act, so that's the definition that we work with. But just to give another context, the World Bank defines it also as a contract between a private party and a government entity for providing a public asset or service in which the private party bears significant risks and management responsibility, and remuneration is linked to performance. That is very important. Remuneration is linked to performance. That is one of the key elements of a PPP. So you don't just get paid for providing an asset or providing a service and walking away, but your remuneration as the private party is linked to performance as defined by the contractual arrangements. The other thing I'd like to draw attention to is that typically when we think about PPPs, we think infrastructure, but PPPs can also apply in services. right? And again, in one of the case studies that I'll show you shortly, it's a service-related PPP, but obviously you need the infrastructure to deliver the service. So typically the private sector brings the infrastructure and then they go on to provide the service as part of the PPP arrangement. So if I can move to the next slide, please. These are just some examples of, well, let me say that this is a spectrum of, let me call it private sector participation and what typically would qualify as a PPP. So when we talk about private sector participation, obviously government works in partnership with the private sector in different forms. But then there's a scale that goes from the private sector's perspective from very low risk or relatively low risk to quite high risk. So on the far left hand of the chart, and again for the benefit of those who are listening, I'll just read it out. If you have a service contract, if you've been contracted by government to provide a service, that is not a PPP because you just deliver the service, then you get paid. You're not assuming any risk. Yes, you may have some KPIs in the contract based on which you're paid, but there's no risk and you are not assuming or you're not delivering a public service on behalf of the government. So that wouldn't typically be a PPP. But then you get into a management contract or a lease or a concession or a partial divestiture, then you're beginning to get into the realm, well, you are actually in the realm of a PPP, because then there are some risks that you're beginning to assume, there are some responsibilities that you're taking on, and then your own remuneration or compensation will be tied to some delivery around this. So specific examples, if you think about management contracts, many years ago, we had a management contract in Ghana Water Company, for example. So some of you who are old enough may remember. So management contracts have been used. Lease arrangements. I think that the arrangement that government tried to enter into with respect to ECG was essentially a lease agreement. And then, of course, we have concessions and BOTs, build, operate, transfer. BOT stands for build, operate, transfer. DBO stands for design, build, and operate. So that's what the private sector would be doing. And then partial divestiture, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the far right, which we would not consider to be a PPP, is where assets have been fully divested to the private sector, because obviously at that point, it's a fully private sector endeavor. So as you move along the scale from the left-hand side of the chart to the right, from a private sector point of view, you're assuming more risk because you have more skin in the game, if I can use that terminology. And that is why PPPs, basically they fall within a range, and we just need to be clear on which particular aspect we are referring to when we talk about PPP. So we can move to the next slide. So what is the business case for PPP as a suitable route for sustainable development? We've already spoken about the challenges that government has from a financing point of view. So we, as a developing country, we have significant demands for infrastructure and public services. But at the same time, we are financially constrained. Therefore, it makes sense for us to explore whatever avenues are available to us in terms of how we bridge that financing gap. And obviously, PPPs offers such opportunity. I said before that PPP is not necessarily all about financing. There's efficiencies, there's innovation, there's other things that the private sector, working in partnership with government, can bring to infrastructure projects and can bring to the delivery of public services. So that's also another benefit that PPPs can bring and can help us along the journey for sustainable development. So in our view, PwC's view, a well-structured and executed and enforced PPP can help in the journey towards sustainable development. But we must have appropriate risk sharing. I'll talk a little bit about that. We must have the right expertise and experience. And then we must have a framework or an environment that allows us to harness the private sector skills and efficiency. And I think largely we do. Yes, we have some macroeconomic challenges, but all things considered, I think we do have that framework. It's about converting it into actual projects and services. So we can move on to the next slide. I think I've already touched on some of this, but let me pick on a few things here because, as I said, the PPP is not just about financing. In essence, it's about value for money, right? It's about value for money. And value for money is on different measures. It's not all about financing. So value for money, I don't know whether you can see the footnote at the bottom of the slide, but value for money means that over the whole life of the project, government's total expenditures, that is payments to the private sector, adjusted for the risks that have been transferred to the private sector, should be less on a net present value basis than if government had performed the services itself. In simple terms, if the private sector is to partner with government to deliver a project or let me put it differently. If the private sector is to partner with government to deliver a public asset or to deliver public services, the only reason it would make sense if there's value for money. In other words, the involvement of the private sector is such that the overall cost to government is lower than if government had done it itself. Otherwise, government should just go ahead and do it, right? So that is the fundamental thinking behind PPP projects. As I said, it's not all about financing. So for a PPP project, no matter what type of project it is, whether it's an airport, whether it's a seaport, whether it's a railway line, the issue is not so much about the asset itself, but about the service. So when government is engaging in a PPP project, partnering with the private sector, including financing, government will be looking at the service that that asset will deliver to the public. It's not, because otherwise you just go and buy or finance the construction of an airport terminal and leave. But you're looking at the service that goes along with it. So government will specify the outputs. In other words, I want a terminal of this size that is capable of, or that has facilities A, B, C, D, E, that has a certain maintenance regime, et cetera, et cetera. There's different sorts of things that government will specify over and beyond the construction of the asset itself. The private sector typically will provide the design, the technology, the construction, the financing, the operations and management. Again, because in most situations, not all, in most situations, the private sector can deliver these things more efficiently than the public sector. It's not always the case, but these are some of the assessments that need to be made. And then the private sector, risks are allocated. So it's a partnership, public-private partnership. So risks are allocated. One party will bear financing risks, one party will bear design risks, regulation, so many different types of risks one could think of. But the risks are allocated between the parties, including demand risk, et cetera, et cetera. And then the private sector is paid according to what it delivers. So let's move on. I've already touched on this, but the benefits of PPPs, access to private capital, risk sharing, innovation efficiency, in principle, not always the case, but in principle, faster project delivery, because the contracting parties would have agreed a timeline, and the private party typically would be remunerated based on attainment of those timelines, et cetera, et cetera. Enhanced accountability, and then private sector capability, in the sense that private sector capability is brought into the delivery of public services and the construction of public infrastructure. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Now, what are the critical success factors that a PPP project requires? How do we actually unlock these benefits? I hope so far I've been able to demonstrate to you that PPPs in concept can align and do align with what we try to achieve in the area of sustainable development. But there are some critical success factors, because I'm sure in the room, maybe when we open it up of Q&A, everybody will have an experience or an example of some PPP that they heard of that never saw the light of day, et cetera, et cetera. So Let's look at some of the critical success factors for PPP projects. Project necessity, it seems obvious, but there must be a need, right? There must be a need for the project, there must be a need for the service. That's number one. So provide essential services. Projects must address critical infrastructure needs. If there's no need, there's no project, so that's obvious. But you must actually have a pretty rigorous, thorough, and realistic assessment of the project, because we have seen projects run into trouble because the assessment was not done properly right from the get-go. This is critically important, as is the third point, project viability and cash flow, because you are partnering with the private sector. And private sector, private business people, I was going to say one motive, but that's not true. They are principally driven by the profit motive. I mean, we're all also interested in societal impact and all of that, but cash is king, right? So when you're talking to the private sector, they are looking for project viability and cash flow as one of their prerequisites. And the way you can assure yourself as much as you can, because it's never 100%, is to do a thorough and realistic assessment of the project. Then you must have appropriate risk sharing. And this is a point that is often misunderstood, because when we talk about PPPs, a lot of people think it's about the private sector bringing money and then the project goes ahead. But there are different elements in there. So for example, if you think about a project, a road project, private sector in principle could come and build a road. For example, private sector could come and upgrade the Accra-Tema motorway, right? But if private sector is to get its return from the project, then somebody has to bear the risk of traffic either not meeting the anticipated level or some other problem crops up that makes the revenues dip. So those are the type of things we're referring to when we talk about risk allocation. In this particular example, that's an example of the demand risk that would need to be managed. So we can move to the next slide. Some of the, I'll use the word softer. They're not soft issues, but traditionally we have focused on the points that I referred to in the earlier slide, sometimes at the expense of these other points, which are also critically important for a successful PPP. So you need a capable private partner. It's a partnership. The idea is that the private sector is stepping in to provide public infrastructure that the government otherwise would have done. The private sector is stepping in to provide a public service that a government agency would otherwise have done. So you must have a capable private partner. Otherwise, the whole principle of a PPP falls apart. And unfortunately, we have seen projects where the private partner has not been able to deliver, and then the project runs into trouble. Government commitment and support is critical. And when I say government commitment and support, it could be from a financing perspective, but it doesn't always have to be. It could be from a regulatory perspective. It could just be from, as the chart shows over there, ensuring that timely approvals are received and that processes move as quickly as possible so that the project can be delivered or the service can be provided efficiently. But it's a partnership between government and the private sector, and the government commitment is indispensable. Otherwise, again, there are problems. Debt guarantees, yes and maybe no. Typically, there are debt guarantees because, again, if you refer back to what I said earlier about the financing streams, you may have commercial lenders as part of your consortium. Even if you don't, you may have development finance institutions or private parties as part of your financing arrangement. Some of those, in fact, most of those, will probably require some kind of comfort so that they make sure that they get their money back. And it sometimes falls on government to provide those guarantees to make the project come together. It all depends on how the project has been structured and how viable the project is, et cetera, et cetera. But most importantly is shared authority, trust, and communication. It's a contract. And as business people, we know that even outside the complications of a PPP, If you're in a business contractual relationship, trust, communication, and shared authority is critical for the project to work, and it's no different in the context of a PPP. Okay, we can move to the next slide. So the PPP Law Act 1039 provides, let me say, must-haves. These are extracted from the law. In fact, everything I'm presenting today is from publicly available information. So if you are interested, you can reference those things yourselves, or we can have a discussion about that. But the PPP Act says that PPP arrangements must deliver value for money. I think I've already explained that. So I'll move on to effective risk allocation, which essentially I've also touched on. Effective risk allocation, the word there, or the key word there, is effective. Because again, sometimes people refer to or think that PPP means that the private sector must do everything. So you've got a private partner with government, so now it's the private sector's responsibility. No, there are some things that the government can do better than the private sector. And actually, there are some things that government can do. For example, giving you a license, right? And so those are some of the things that a PPP would be looking for government to do. Affordability and long-term government budgetary sustainability. So the project must be affordable. And affordability is in a number of different contexts. If the project is what we call a user paid project, in other words, for example, a toll road, where those who use the road are going to pay tolls, is the toll affordable, right? Or if government is putting in some money to make the project affordable or just to support the project generally, is what government being asked to put into the project sustainable? So those are some of the things that the Act requires that we look at. It also says we must maximize the use of local content and foster technology transfer so that we promote local industries and the private sector in Ghana. You know, when we talk about PPPs, most people think automatically about foreign investors. Not necessarily. PPPs can happen within the local economy, and I think this is one of the very good provisions that drive us more towards local participation in some of those things. And it must have a possible impact on the public trust. Safeguarding vulnerable groups, setting affordable user charges and tariffs, and then also environmental considerations. So we must, or PPP projects must conform to Ghana's environmental laws and adhere to the highest standards. So all these boxes have to be ticked in order for a project to qualify as a PPP under the Act that we have here in Ghana. We can move to the next slide. So, I think I've downloaded a lot of information, and I know bits of it may still be moving around in people's minds, but I thought I could give some examples of PPP projects and what has made them successful as against other projects that have yet to achieve success, okay? So I have 4 case studies, 2 of success and 2 that are still in the works towards success. And I have 2 from right here in Ghana in the transport sector. I think my examples are from the transport sector and another sector. So let's get into it. If I can go on to the next slide. Okay, so this we all know. We all know about this project. As to whether we look at it as a PPP, is maybe what it is a PPP. This is the National Identification System project, essentially the Ghana card, which today I think we cannot do much without. So this is a PPP project. Private company Identity Management Systems Limited. It's a design, build, operate, and transfer project, and it was closed in 2017. Right. So the issue of national ID cards is obviously a government function, right? But in this case, we have a private party that is, or that has invested in the equipment, the infrastructure that is required to produce the Ghana card and is issuing it on behalf of the National Identification Authority. So it's a project that has come together as a partnership. And as I said before, it's a design, build, operate, and transfer. What has made it successful? I'll just pick on two, maybe three things. And I'll go to on the right-hand side of the slide, where it refers to project viability and cash flow. And by the way, as I said before, this information is from publicly available sources. So this is from a report that the NIA gave to Parliament in February 2023. So if you're interested, you can take your time to research it and read more about it. But essentially, the project is viable because of the cash flows that it delivers. There's enough money to pay the bills, essentially, and to cover the costs of the financing, as it says there, to pay off the debt, and to give the private sector the return that they are looking for the risk that they've assumed. Now, how was that made possible? It was made possible by point number 4 on my slide, which refers to government commitment and support. Now, in this particular project, and I stand to be corrected, I'm not sure government actually put in money, or even if they did, it was mostly private sector money. But government commitment and support came through legislation and regulation. So if government says you must have a Ghana card, and I've contracted with party A to provide the Ghana cards, well, I guess it's a market that is basically solely for this particular partnership. But it's serving a public good, right? It's providing a public service. And so today, of course, there was also a guarantee for the project, a financing guarantee. But of course, guarantees are backstops. As I said before, depending on the financing mix for the project, it may or may not be required. But here's an example of a PPP that has worked. I'll leave this one, I'll go to the next one, but we can come back to the examples maybe once I've done. I've then gone to South Africa to look at a rail project, the How Train. Now, if you've been to South Africa, you may have used the rapid transit from the international airport into Sandton, the How Train. Now, the How Train is a PPP project which came about. In fact, the need for that project came through the 2010 World Cup, when they were considering how to move large volumes of people from the airport into town without congesting the roads and creating safety issues, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the How Train had its challenges. And in actual fact, a lot of PPPs do have challenges, but the issue is that you can actually work them out just like any other contractual relationship. So How Train is another successful PPP project. Design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. So the private party designed, they built, they are operating, and they are maintaining the service. And I'm emphasizing the service. Yes, infrastructure, the railway line, rolling stock, etc., but it's about the service, right? And that is ongoing. Again, what made this successful? Clear allocation of roles and risks. So it was clear. Public authority, you do this. Private party, you do that. And so far as everybody is doing their part, we can achieve success. As I said, it was a bit shaky from the beginning, but I think they got there in the end. Clear KPIs have been set and enforced as the basis for private sector remuneration. So the private sector that is operating the service has to meet certain performance indicators based on which they are remunerated. So they cannot go to sleep and not deliver on their part of the bargain. Because if they do so, then the public authority then has the right to either withhold or to penalize whatever the contractual arrangement requires. Again, for this project, there was government commitment and support. And one of the points perhaps I've not made very clear so far is that even where we refer to financing using a PPP, it need not necessarily be 100% financing from the private sector. It may be that the project needs 200. Government only has 100. So private sector can bring in the 100. So it can be partial. In the case of How Train, it was actually largely financed by government. They put in $3 billion equivalent, and then the private sector raised the rest of the financing to complete the project. But then by virtue of the fact that it's being operated and maintained by the private sector, the efficiencies and the demand for the service has ensured that there's been sufficient cash flows so that the stakeholders can be paid. As I said before, a PPP project is not about the asset itself, it's about the service. And the private parties in the consortium, and in this case, even the government itself, I think has realized significant benefits and returns from that PPP arrangement. So these are two case studies that show how PPPs can work if successfully structured. I'd like to go to two other examples that are let me put it differently. We're still getting there. Okay, so this project, the desalination plant, I don't know, some of you may have read about it. It's a difficult one, and I think that we're still trying to get it right. So this is a water desalination plant somewhere in Teshinungwa. It's a build, own, operate, and transfer. I think it's fair to say that it has run into difficulties. It seems, and I'm not 100% sure because all I have is publicly available information, it seems that perhaps the initial assessments that were done need to be redone, and some fine-tuning needs to be done to make the project come to fruition. But the idea was essentially to provide water to the community. As I said before, it's an example of a social project. But I think all being said, the tariffs, the cost, the unit cost of the water was just too high. And affordability became an issue. And therefore, obviously, the project has not progressed to the satisfaction of either party or to the community. So here's an example of a project that hasn't quite worked, whether it's the initial assessment or whether it's the project risks that have not been properly allocated. I think this is one where some reworking is ongoing or needs to be done to turn it into a success story. And like I said, even How Train, which I'm saying is a success story, did have to have some fine-tuning along the way to make it successful. Then my final example is another transport project. This is in the UK, from the London Underground, where this is quite old now. Back in 2003, London Underground tried to expand its network with a private partner, and the risk allocation just didn't work. The private party was not sufficiently equipped to deliver the project, and therefore the project did not take off. Project assessment, back to project assessment, was insufficient. It wasn't thorough or as thorough as it ought to have been. It wasn't realistic. Eventually the PPP did not work and the project had to revert into public hands. So this is a very quick run through. There's many examples of projects that have worked and those that have not, but it is possible. It is possible to use PPPs as a financing option for development, as I hope at least some of the examples or two of the examples that I've shown you have indicated. So let's move to the next slide. I'll try and finish this up so we can open it up for discussion. So how do we make it a viable financing option here in Ghana? We can go to the next slide. I'm not going to dwell on this, but just to say that based on what's available in the public domain, and this is 2023 data, which is the latest we can find, but there's a number of PPP projects still being worked in the pipeline. If we can go on to the next slide, it will give you a view as to what type of projects government is looking at. So you can see a wide range of projects here. You can see a sports terminal, a bus terminal, Accra-Tema motorway expansion. Maybe let's go to the next slide. You can see railway lines. I mean, different projects of different sizes. So there's a number of projects that are in the works. One thing about PPP projects is that they do take time to put together, again, because of all the different moving parts that one has to think about. But this is clearly an opportunity, or there is clearly an opportunity for us to use PPPs as a financing channel for development projects. Complicated, yes. Success stories limited at this point, but the opportunity remains, as we've seen from some case studies and as we see in other parts of the world. We can move on to the next slide. I think I've already said this. Some of the lessons for us here in Ghana is that they are complex and time-consuming to put together. But it is better to spend the time to get it right up front than to have a situation on your hands where you have to rework the whole project, or where we are not getting the benefits that we desire from the project towards our sustainable development. PPP projects need to be aligned with our long-term goals as a country for sustainability and value for money. And I think, as I've already said, they are long-term commitments, commercial relationships between the public and the private sector. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is my last slide. For us at PwC, we've been working on PPPs. We've studied PPP projects in different parts of the world through our global network. We've been fortunate enough to have worked with the Ministry of Finance and other government agencies to assess PPP projects in Ghana. And we firmly believe that it is indeed a viable financing option. It's not that straightforward. So it's not like going to the bank, borrowing money, and off you go. There are different considerations, but it can work. It can work, and when it works, the benefits are quite significant for the economy. So where we are today as a country, where we have a significant deficit in terms of infrastructure, and in fact public services, not just public infrastructure, but public services as well, we believe that PPPs do offer a way out, not just in terms of the financing, but in terms of the broader benefits of efficiency, innovation, etc. But we also don't underplay the fact that it requires careful analysis, careful study. The most important thing for us that we always say is that we need to look at it as a partnership. The public authority, the government must do its part, but so must the private sector. Too often we've seen projects where either government has not done its part, what it's supposed to do, and therefore the project is stuck. But then for us in the private sector as well, we also see examples where we have also not delivered on our promise. So in order for this to work, both parties must do their part. But we firmly believe that PPPs actually do offer a channel of financing for development. It just needs to be carefully aligned to the specific project, the specific service, and what our long-term objectives are. So I think that's my last slide. If you can move to the next slide, let me just check. Yes, so I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that's been informative, and I look forward to whatever questions or comments that you have for me. Thank you.
We can definitely do better. Senior Country Partner, PwC, Vish Ashiagbo. And, ending and talking about the fact that both the public and the private have roles to play, and we must ensure that those roles are played, in effect, the responsibilities. We're fortunate because we have the Chief Director of the Ministry of Finance here. We also have a representative from Margins Group. You heard the story about the Ghana card, something that we are all proud of today. And so this is what I'm going to do. I'll take brief comments from Cynthia Arthur from the Ministry of Finance, then I'll get to Sylvia from the Margins Group, and then we'll open it all up. So let's get a microphone to them. If there's a microphone already, yes. Cynthia Arthur is here. Please, let's get a microphone to her.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Hello. So I'm at Public and Assets Division. Not
Sure. Thank you.
But it's good to know that you can see into the future. So thank you very much. I think that is a very good presentation. I think it's a good presentation, which touched on all the things I would have said if I was the one doing the presentation. And I also like the fact that you emphasized key success factors that sometimes is misconstrued by the private sector as to what the role of government is, and vice versa, because there are fiscal challenges, as was said in the MC's introduction. Government is actually looking towards getting the private sector, if possible, to take off all the financial responsibilities that comes up with delivering infrastructure and public services in the country. But the role of both parties is actually key. Once we understand that, and I like the fact that you mentioned shared authority, trust, and communication. Because it's a long-term contractual agreement, it's important that both parties understand their rights and obligations under the contract. And this comes with continuous engagements and communication in terms of the KPIs, what our understandings are, and also fostering some basic understanding in terms of obligations and delivering of the KPIs. The capability of the private sector is key. We are in a stage where, as a country, private sector is still building capacity. So over the years, we have relied on foreign participants in our development efforts. But gradually, we have seen the Ghanaian private sector coming on board. I can say that there are some contractors who are also leading. Bankra Mamudu, for instance, has a heavy local content there. And if you see the fact that GIF, which is seen as the government rep in this engagement, is supporting this to happen, it's something that we think that given the government commitment, as you have again mentioned, we can have a lot more PPPs coming into being. But I also want to add other factors that I see from where I sit. Appraisal is key. It requires patience. We are used to EPC type of contracts where government will give a contractor a contract to deliver a public good, road, schools, or whatever infrastructure. And so it's quick. We are used to that. But with PPPs, it's not like that. We have to make sure that we have the necessary demand factors, sources of revenue, and even regulated by fees and charges, because it's a public service. The fees, and again, you mentioned affordability. And so it's important that the public is able to afford in terms of the fees and charges, which also comes with regulations. And so that is also there. And in terms of government commitment, again, in terms of policy, we are all aware about the tolls that were taken off, I think 2 years ago or so. We are thinking of bringing it back. And I'm happy that the public, most of the Ghanaian public, are happy about the tolls coming back, because we have seen the effects of it being taken off. And the fact that once it comes back, we are able to improve and support PPP, because without fees and the willingness of the public to pay for these services, PPPs may not happen. And so there's also the need for the willingness of the public to pay for these services. And then I also saw the value for money, as you mentioned. In fact, we are the Ministry of Finance are not only looking for value for money, which is key, but we're also looking for value for people. You mentioned about the fact that it's important that there is need for the infrastructure. If there's no need for the infrastructure, it affects the demand, the numbers, cash flow for the project to be viable. And therefore, it's important that apart from the demand, prices or fees is also key in determining a viable project. And so for us, value for money is key. It must be cheaper for government to allow the private sector to do it as you explained it. But also, whatever service we are delivering must be of the right quality, and people must be happy to pay for the service to make the PPP work. So with these few remarks, I'm happy about your presentation, and thank you very much. We are happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. which means we can hear from Sylvia from the Margins Group.
Thank you very much, sir, for the good presentation. I'm Sylvia Boatma-Asare, and I'm the Acting Chief Operating Officer for Identity Management Systems. Identity Management System is a subsidiary of the Margins ID Group, which is a bigger company that is involved in providing IT solutions and identity solutions globally. The Ghana card is one of our projects, a success as well. So if you look at the things that we have learned from the project, I think the speaker has been very well in presenting what the project is about, so I will not delve into that. But I will touch on some of the issues and things that we dealt with to have this success story. So we had a clear legal framework. So if you look at one of the successes that make a PPP very successful, is having a very good framework, a legal framework, and also we deployed a high level of risk assessment and management. So we made sure that we had our risk profile in place and how we would deal with this risk. So this was one of the key things that helped us. And then the next one will be efficiency and expertise. We brought to the table a lot of efficiency and expertise, and we ensured that we were delivering value to Ghana and to Ghanaians as well. And you can see that in how the usage of the card has become very important in many of our society services that we are providing, i.e. banking services, GRA, and most of the things that we do. So in conclusion, mobilization of resource was also a key success factor of the project. So we worked with banks and supply companies to ensure that we deliver value to Ghana. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We also have DCOP Ben Osei-Adai here. DCOP, you want to make some brief remarks before we move on? Yes, please get a microphone to DCOP.
Well, for me in the security service, all this money issue is quite germane to me. But I am happy to be here to represent the Inspector General of Police and also know what goes on here. And in fact, some of the things I am experiencing or I am seeing here, I didn't know about it. That, for example, what the main speaker, Mr. Vish Ashago, talked about, that the Ghana card project, this whole Ghana card project is a PPP. It's quite new to me. I didn't know anything about it. So I'm here more to observe and take the good things I will learn from here back to the police headquarters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DCOP Ben Adai, which means we are open for questions now and comments. Just show by hand. We'll get a microphone to you. And okay, I see one at the back. I see two hands at the back. Okay, yes, first. Then we go to the second one at the back. You tell us your name, the institution you're coming from, and then you go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Amponsa-Boatin. I'm with PKF. In fact, I've known Vish for a very long time because we're in the same industry. When he began to speak, it was like, oh, he's the finance minister, and maybe that would have been his deputy. Now, you see, we must know that at the moment we are under IMF, and we are looking at financing. Okay, some banks have gone down, okay, in the past. So I'm just imagining how the private sector will be able to be a support to the government. One issue which is dear to my heart is the debt to equity ratio, okay, which you know has an effect on those who want to do that. I wouldn't say a favor to the government. Now, we are also saying that we want the PPPs to benefit generations. You didn't give us maybe the number of years, but I can tell you that if you're not careful, the next generation, due to how we are managing the resources that we have, we are going to suffer. Let me just pick a few because of time.
As you make it very brief, because we need to pick a lot of thoughts before we, yes, go ahead.
Okay, now we are looking at education, the F-cube, free SHS. Personally, I don't think that we've done well. Housing, Saglemi is there, it's gone waste. Energy, okay? We are looking at how we can revamp that sector. And the Galamsey activities, water resources, the pollution. So you see, all that you are saying, I agree with you. But if you're not careful, the next generation wouldn't even be there. And I'm sure by the time we are all dead and gone, Ghana might not even be in existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see two hands there. From there we come here. Okay, so two hands there. We pick them and then we get Vish to address them. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Akufo-Addo. I'm the West African Regional Director for CAT. Thank you very much, Vince, for your wonderful presentation. I'd like to say that I have done an extensive review of the PPP Act and the policy. And one of the things that I think that when it is improved, it can enhance the visibility and also the outcome of our PPP vision. I think currently it is housed in a unit at the Ministry of Finance. And I think that if we can evacuate it and set up a PPP secretariat that will be equipped with more experts in that regard, they will be able to identify projects, do a roadshow. I was recently in Singapore and some African countries had itemized some projects and they were doing some roadshow. So we can do better with what we have currently. Number two, the first question I'll talk about education sector. I can also see that government of Ghana has been spending a lot of resources in senior high school, especially when the free SHS came. They had to put up more infrastructure to accommodate more students. And some schools that are in the cities are sitting on big prime lands that are not being used, and those lands are being fenced. And one way that government can do is that we can identify some strategic areas. Let's say, for example, Presec or even University of Ghana has got a huge tract of land. We can decide to get a PPP to come and develop some of them into, let's say, commercial infrastructure, high-class residential areas, and then part of the money can be used by the universities to also develop its academic and its infrastructure needs. So in this way, there will be a win-win for both sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Winston. My name is Kofi Yesu.
Okay.
Assistant Headmaster of Accra Academy. No wonder everybody is talking about education. First of all, let me commend the speaker for telling us what he has given us this morning, and the two ladies who also came in to explain one or two things to us. We can see that financing education has now become a challenge to our nation, and we can all attest to the fact that the free SHS is a good thing, but so many things we were not able to do it in a positive direction. As somebody put it, the accommodation and things like that, where students will lodge. And now we have a lot of uncompleted buildings in our schools. Talking about the PPP, is there any possible means that we can get other people to come to the school and then support us if the government cannot go the way that we want to see it, so that we can see our schools moving on in the right direction? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll get Vish to address the first three questions, then we'll come around again for the next set of questions.
Thank you, Winston, and thank you for those questions and remarks. So I'll start with my colleague from PKF and the concern that he expressed about, if I understood the question correctly, essentially you're concerned that we may end up loading the government with further debt, which future generations will be saddled with.
But you see, this is actually one of the key considerations that one must look at when designing a PPP project. Because in essence, a PPP project should not leave the government with debt that it cannot sustain, right? So sustainable financing is one of the aspects of a PPP. So typically, if you put together a PPP project that is financed by the private sector, the debt would not be on government's books. Typically, the project company is the one that will assume the debt, and that debt is then paid for by proceeds. If it's a user-paying project, then proceeds that come in from the users. So, for example, if the let's take a simple example of a road again. If it's a PPP project, then in principle, the tolls should be sufficient to cover the debt and to pay the expenses, etc., if it is well designed, so that it is sustainable, so that it doesn't become an obligation on government. There are some instances where the project cannot be self-financing and government has to put in some money. In that case, what has to happen is that the obligations on government have to be properly quantified, so that government knows that it has to put in, let's say, 100 million per annum, no more than that. And then it's budgeted for year on year, so that government can comfortably factor that into its projections and ensure that we don't have debt accumulation arising from these projects. So the fear is real, and I understand what you're saying, but it's something that is critical to the proper design of a PPP. And where PPP projects run into trouble, where debt sustainability becomes an issue, then the PPP has to be restructured. It's as I said in the presentation, it's similar to any other contract, as sometimes you may have to go in and restructure it. But you do not start off with the objective of putting debt on government's books. And if government has to provide some financing, it must be properly quantified and contained so that you don't end up creating the problem that you've referred to. The next question was about the PPP being housed in the Ministry of Finance. So yes, I know that in some countries they have separate PPP authorities that are institutions on their own. Maybe the team from Ministry of Finance can comment better, but from our perspective, in our PPP journey as a country, I think that perhaps we need to get a few more experiences under our belt before we can set up a fully independent PPP authority. So the point is well made, and I understand exactly what you're saying, because if it's set up independently and is able to run at arm's length from central government, serving the interest of all parties, that is the ultimate. And that exists in some countries, but in Ghana we're not there yet, and I think it's something that we can aspire to in due course. Then the final point was about education, and education. From what I took from the question, it seems like the question is leaning towards education infrastructure. So using PPPs to provide hostels or accommodation facilities, or maybe even classrooms or such like. And all of those things are possible. It can be done, it has been done. Yes, I know in Ghana we have a situation where I think the University of Ghana ran into some trouble with some hostel projects. Yes, but the principle is there and it can work. The challenge with social projects of this nature is that from a commercial point of view, they may not necessarily pay for themselves. But that is where the structuring and the risk allocation between the public authority and the government, and the private sector comes to play. So again, the public authority may dedicate some budgetary allocation to bridge the gap between what is affordable for the occupants if it's a hostel and what the private sector needs to cover its costs. So all of this is possible. I think it's a journey that we're on, and the assessment has to be done thoroughly, but PPPs can work in pretty much any sector. It's just that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and you need to study it carefully. So, Winston.
Thank you very much, Vish. Okay, so we'll pick the next set of questions. I see the lady here, the hand. Yes, we need to get the lady here to also ask a question. Her hand has been up for a very long time. So, as and when you caught my eye, I come to you, yes. Don't worry, everybody will have a chance.
Thank you very much. My name is Mercy Avogo. I work with the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So, during your presentation, you stated that PPP is not always financing. And I believe putting in the right framework in Ghana is also a factor. You also stated that a key factor to successful PPP delivery is speedy delivery of the project. With your experience in Ghana, knowing where we came from and where we are now, with our current legislative framework, the Act 1039 particularly, do you find the Act very enabling to drive the PPP agenda in Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Philip Latte. I used to work in a public authority, but now I work at the other side as a private consultant. So I have two contributions mainly. And the first one has to do with government's attention when it comes to PPPs. So many government functionaries, when they tend to hype up PPPs as a panacea to solve all our problems. But as soon as they hit reality, then they realize that probably PPPs might not even be possible within the period of their term. And then they tend quickly to move to EPC contracts and start to load government's books with debt. So it's important that government, or the public party, for that matter, understands that PPPs, especially during the design period, takes time in terms of the preparation. Typically, we are talking of PPPs which will last about 20 years, and as Vish says, at least a generation. So PPPs, in this part, will last probably up to 2 to 3 years in terms of planning, for going through all the cycle of doing the feasibility, getting the various approvals and things. And sometimes it doesn't become too attractive for governments to go into PPPs, and they tend sometimes to frustrate their efforts because they would say, okay, let me go to what I am typically comfortable with. Then the second comment I want to make happens to do with PPPs in terms of being done at the assembly level, and some of my previous speakers have spoken about that. When we talk about PPPs in fora like this, it tends to be on a national scale. But it's important for us to realize that PPPs also can really thrive very well at the district and the assembly levels. And sometimes, because of the seeming bureaucracy at national level, some of the proponents tend to want to start to work with the assemblies because, unfortunately, they don't have the critical and analytical skills there to give your feasibility some kick. You see. So I think we need to look at the opportunities there: markets, hostels, transport terminals, hospital facilities. They are all there, and I have had the opportunity to work with a couple of proponents who try to avoid going to the national, that's been up to Ministry of Finance, and think that they would prefer to work at assembly levels. But sometimes you are not going to get the best value for money, and I think they need to improve their capacity at that sector. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Philip, let's see. Okay.
All right, thank you. Inu Sashraz, Minister of Education. And I wish to congratulate Vish. You've been around for a while. A couple of two quick questions. Number one, I think Philip touched on it, and it's about the appetite of political leadership. I sit before ministers to advise them on financing options for projects. PPPs, very good, as you have presented, but in many instances, this political leadership is concerned about the duration or the time period required in structuring PPP. What has been your experience and how will you be able to advise in this? And the second one is just to make a kind of a quick response to my colleague from Accra. Senior, we have a vibrant public investment unit in Ministry of Education, established in line with the public investment regulation. So if you have any concerns, please link up so that we can have a discussion and see how we are able to put together a project paper and then engage with our colleagues at Ministry of Finance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I see, okay, so let's get to, yes, 1, 2.
My name is Ebenezer Afenyidazi, editor Manjo Online. I enjoyed the presentation a lot. For me as a journalist, I've had the thinking always that PPP covers even government just singling out people, sole sourcing and giving them contracts, and then maybe provides all the money. But like you said, there's a clear distinction between what that and the other is. I think that sometimes maybe in the conversation we are leaving out the elephant in the room, because from where I sit, I have this mindset, I could be wrong, that sometimes the PPP arrangements probably have very sophisticated monitoring and fiscal discipline systems that probably may not allow crook politicians who may want to benefit from kickbacks and what have you. But probably the other way around is easier. You know, the ones where we call you, sole sourcing, we give you, and all those ones. Maybe those ones become easier for people to get some benefits on the side. And so sometimes PPP may not be an option. And like my brother said, the politician is also looking at short-term gains because of the political benefit. And PPPs usually are long-term projects. And so sometimes there may be a dislike towards that. But I also want to get something. Is it really from you? Is it a case of limited capacity of private sector players in our country? Because our economy is generally small if you compare to many others. Or it's an issue of the lack of political will because of sometimes certain benefits that a PPP properly so-called will not allow certain loopholes for those leakages into people's private pockets, and so it becomes a challenge. Also, I want to make a quick comment. Madam from Finance Ministry made a comment that people are happy that Towboat is coming back. I don't believe so. I don't know on what basis she made that claim. Because when the announcement was made, even by the recent road minister nominee, the comment I have gleaned generally from social media is that for those who want it back, they want it back in an efficient format and a digitalized format where I don't have to be in a queue for so long before I pay. And also in a digitalized format that allows proper accountability of the monies that are going to be collected, that they will go into the right places of the road fund to solve the problems of the roads. So it's not a general reaction that people are excited that it's coming back. We want a properly modernized system that ensures that the monies are being taken to the right places. Because don't forget, there was a social component in the former system, which is that it was employing disabled persons. So there was a social component. So we don't know how the monies were being utilized and all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ebenezer. Okay, last question for now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Edmond Awaiti. I own a book business, value-added book services. Mr. Ashongo, excellent presentation. Based on your experience, has a service level agreement between private sector and the public sector be effective? In what way can that be effectively implemented so that we have effective and efficient projects? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edmund. We'll get Vish. Okay, last question you say? Okay.
My name is Enoch Nswamensa from Aries Properties, Ghana Limited. Vish, thanks for the presentation that you made. I think that PPPs are an excellent forum for raising financing, and it's something that we've been looking out for quite a very long time. For 8 years, for instance, we were sitting on $650 million to invest in Ghana. We could only disburse $70 million. The challenge is that projects like Vish mentioned is not able to guarantee cash flow. And so if your project is not able to guarantee the cash flow to make it viable, it becomes a major challenge. The very simple thing that could be done is take off taxes, and that alone is 21% of the project cost. Politicians are unwilling to take it, even though it serves the social good. And so sometimes you wonder what the Ministry of Finance will be looking at if at the end of the day, a 21% added on to a project cost does not make it viable. That's the reason why you find hostels not attractive in the bigger scale, because the kind of policy that you require to regulate rentals does not make it a viable option. And I think it is up to us as a government or a nation to take a second look at it. The other thing is also that there is a wrong perception of PPPs. Wrong perception in the sense that politicians or people in offices sometimes think of it as a loan. And so they look at it as going to the bank and then taking a project finance, 2%, 10%, and that basically is it. For anybody who is looking at a long-term investment, he's looking something way beyond that kind of rate, because he has another kind of option for the investment that he has. And finally, what I would like to say is that government itself shoots itself in the foot, because sometimes they compete. Government competes with itself with some projects that they could literally have rolled it out as PPPs, but find it so attractive that they would want to do an EPC and then leave out the ones which are literally booming for the private sector to go and invest in. And so it doesn't make it very attractive for people to go into such PPPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll get Vish to address, hold on 1 minute, we'll get Vish to address all these questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Pamela DeBort. I'm a partner at EY. Hello,
Sure.
Vish. Good presentation. Very quick question. I hear you mention the fact that a lot of the information you supplied us today comes from the public domain. But how do people get information on what PPPs government is up for grabs? Where is the information? How do people get to know that? The accessibility of information becomes very important here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Vish?
Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions. Try and touch on each of them in order which they were up. So I think the lady who asked the first question was asking about the Act and whether it was sufficient in terms of enabling PPPs in Ghana. And I would have to say yes. The Act is pretty elaborate, and it talks about so many things. I know it took a number of years to put together, and the short answer to your question is yes. It considers a number of different things, but again, like any other law, I guess that as we progress, we may come back and fine-tune certain aspects of it. But as we sit today, it makes provision for essentially all the things we've spoken about, the risk allocation, any support that government has to put in, the procurement process, which I think one gentleman asked about. It's pretty elaborate. So I think that it is fit for purpose. But again, because it's quite elaborate, that's some of the things that we need to get used to as private sector business people. Sometimes we just need to take our time and work through things. And the idea is to safeguard the interests of the state. And that's why it's as elaborate as it is. And I think it does work. So hopefully that's a good enough answer for that. Then somebody asked about the time it takes, I think, if I got the question right.
Yeah.
And the fact that it doesn't fit into the political cycle, and was asking about our experience. I mean, the fact is, yes, PPPs take time to put together. But remember, what we're talking about here is sustainable development. So if you want to put a project in place that is going to continue to deliver benefits for generations, you cannot do it overnight. It takes time. Yes, we have had experiences where government officials or specifically politicians want a project concluded within a certain 4-year term. It probably has not been possible, but the good part of it is that this notwithstanding, the work has continued, right? The work has continued. So any government, in my experience, that comes in typically picks up the project from where it was left off. They may push it along a little bit further. They may not conclude it, but I believe that over time we'll get there. Perhaps we'll get there a bit later than we ordinarily would have done because of the time frames. But yes, it's an issue. We must acknowledge that. But I think as understanding, if I can use the word focus, if we focus on what is sustainable development, if we can focus on that extensively, then PPPs will actually work in our environment. Somebody asked about, or made a point about, I think it was a gentleman from Joy who was referring to corruption, I'm paraphrasing, corruption, and maybe that's why people don't want to do PPPs. Well, I think corruption is possible in any type of contract, but the thing about the PPP Act is that it is pretty rigorous in terms of how you must go about identifying, selecting, and contracting. So I don't think you're even allowed to sole source under the PPP Act. You must go through a bid process, and you must go through certain approval stages. So these are some of the things that lengthens the timeline, but ultimately, again, the idea is to safeguard the public interest. So it goes through a number of review stages and is subject to a certain amount of rigor. That will not eliminate the corruption, but I think there are safeguards in place, not just for corruption, but value for money, and I think, as Cynthia said, essentially value for people. To Enoch's point about projects not guaranteeing, there was a question about SLAs as to whether, in our experience, SLAs have been effective. I think the answer is simply that it's been mixed, right? Private sector is quite used to working with SLAs. But the thing with SLAs is this: once you define a performance indicator, you must have essentially about 3 key things. You must have the baseline. So where are you starting from? If you say to somebody, I want you to move me from 0 to 100, and I'll pay you based on your progress in getting me there, then you must know that you actually started from 0. Because if indeed you are starting from 95, and then the other partner comes back and tells you, oh, by the way, we've reached 100, so you owe me this remuneration, then you'd be shortchanging yourself. So you must have the baseline, and then the definition of those KPIs must be clear. A lot of the time when SLAs run into trouble, it's because there's debate as to what was meant. What was actually the performance indicator that we were measuring? How was it to be measured? Who was to measure it? And is it done or is not done? So clarity is essential. But private sector is pretty used to KPIs. And I think in some of the PPPs that have run into trouble, KPIs have become a debate because one person understood it one way, another person understood it a different way, and maybe the baseline was not even clear. But they can work, but they just need to be clearly defined and established. Then there was a question about not guaranteeing, the projects are not guaranteeing cash flows. And if I understood the question clearly, what you're suggesting is that because for public services, there tends to be a cap on how much you can charge, right? So that also affects the financials of the project. That's a debate with the public authority. And the public authority, and I think the PPP Act requires this, the public authority thinks more broadly than just the numbers from a financial perspective. They are thinking about economic benefits and such like, but they all need to be quantified. So I think that projects can be made viable or bankable with some level of government support, with some level of government accommodation, provided it is clear that there are wider benefits that the project brings to bear. And in that case, I think it's possible. It's not easy, and I acknowledge that. It's not easy, but in our environment where we're grappling with affordability issues and trying to manage government's fiscal position, I think that's where the challenges come. So it makes it more difficult, but it is possible. It's a matter of negotiation and engagement. So Pamela's question about accessibility of data, I think if you went to the Ministry of Finance, the Public Investment Department, I hope that's what you're still called. So, yeah, you can get all the information you need. I think at a point it was actually published. I'm not sure whether it still is, but that information is publicly available. Projects that are either in preparation or projects that are ready to go, that's all publicly available information that you can get from the Ministry of Finance, from Cynthia's team. Yeah.
Okay, I think, Cynthia, you want to make a quick point, because our time is up. We need to be wrapping up. We'll be taking off air shortly, so just make it very brief for me.
All right, thank you very much. In terms of information, if you go to the Ministry of Finance website, we have the annual PPP reports that we publish. I have 10 copies here for those who are interested. But online, you would find this publication on the ministry's website. And quickly, just to add a few comments, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that now.
In 30 seconds.
The ministry, in terms of its commitment to PPPs, we also have the viability gap scheme, where government feels strongly that PPP project will be viable with its commitment. We are willing to provide some support in terms of the capex, or also in terms of the revenue shortfall.
Okay.
It all depends on the project that we are seeking to advance. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And on that note, brings us to the end of the first quarter edition of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast meeting. We're now crossing over to Parliament, where Minister for Defense Designate, Dr. Edward Kofi Omanebwama, has been vetted. My name is Winston, and when you're live on the Joy News channel and Joy 99.7 FM, do have a lovely day.